Chapter 1648. In the empty room where the former Silver Maya's body was placed, Lamias faced Musha and suddenly had a feeling of panic. The other party had pointed out her background in a single breath. If you were sure that a person came from the future, what would you do first? Lamias couldn't think of it. Perhaps, if it was her, what she wanted to know most was about the future, especially everything about her future. Then what about Musha? After knowing this, how would he treat her? Lamias couldn't help but look at the girl who looked almost the same as her on the stone bed. As Musha said, this girl seemed to be younger than her, 17 or 18 years old. She was younger than the bronze satyr she had met in the Pegasus camp before. The Maya lying on the stone bed was Musha's sister. Obviously, she wasn't. The same soul, reincarnation of the soul, Maya, could it be her previous life in this era? Because of this, she could return to this era through the ability of the Manor Master Luaccio. At this moment, Lamias's mind was in a mess. She couldn't understand everything in front of her. Your silence, can I take it as your acquiescence? Musha suddenly said, Actually, I'm just guessing a big guess. Then, please tell me, which era did you come from? Lamias looked up and hesitated. She suddenly thought of a series of chain reactions. It was reasonable to say that the past couldn't be changed. But since she came to the past era, her words and actions had already affected the future. You don't dare to say it, right? Musha said indifferently. You're afraid that if you say it, the future will change, right? This man, could it be that he had the ability to see through the other's mind? Lamias was shocked at this time. When she looked at Musha again, there was a real reverence. Perhaps the future won't change because of this. Musha shook his head at this time. Because since you can appear here, it means that no matter what you do here, it has no effect on you who has already come to this era. Only when things are set and unchanged will your existence appear, your arrival. In fact, in your era, before your arrival, everything that happened in my era had already happened, and you were involved. Are you saying that no matter what I do here, I can't change the future? Lamias was stunned. She frowned and said, What I don't dare to do from now on is actually something that has already been done. You can understand it this way. Musha nodded. Of course, at least for me, that's what I think. Every era has its limits. Just like how primitive people are unable to understand the arithmetic of the present. For me, the mainstream of thought in this era and the limits of knowledge are the barriers that limit me. I can only understand this much. That was already monstrous, all right? Lamias couldn't help but lament in her heart. Indeed, powerful people and geniuses were the same no matter what era they were in. Lamias couldn't help but think that if Musha had been born in the future era of information explosion, his understanding of time and space would have been even more incredible. However, going back to the past doesn't mean that you can change the future. After going back, you might just repeat everything that has already happened. Lamias lowered her head. I'm here because I was here before. Any futile attempt to change the past is just a fantasy. No, I'm more inclined to believe that it's not that you can't change anything, but that when you can change something, you will stop before you change it. Musha's eyes suddenly lit up. At this moment, Lamias seemed to see the infinite wisdom contained in this man's eyes. It was as bright as the stars. I don't understand. At this time, Musha directly sat down, but after sitting down, his body floated into the air at the same time. His eyes gradually became deep. You will disappear. When you want to do something to change the past, it is the same as touching the foundation of your future. Because you have touched the foundation that can change your future existence, you will disappear. I think that when you are about to make a change, you will have this feeling. It will urge you to stop, let you know what you should do and what you shouldn't do. This is the arrangement of fate. Lamias opened her mouth. She couldn't help but be shocked by Musha's point of view. If, as Musha mentioned, there were people in this world other than her who could return to the past, they clearly had the ability to change something, but when the change came, they would receive a revelation and know that they would disappear in the future. They would stop. They would definitely stop. From Lamias's point of view, she wasn't so great that she would never exist in order to change something in the future. That's not right. Lamias was struck by an idea. She looked at Musha and gritted her teeth. According to what you said, if I did something that changed the future and touched the foundation of my existence in the future, and I disappeared in the future, or even never appeared, how could I go back to the past and make these changes? If I don't exist in the future, the matter of me returning to the past also doesn't exist. The future won't change, right? Isn't this already changed? Musha said indifferently. It's just that you don't exist anymore, so you don't know how your future will change. This is already a change. I don't exist, already changed. I don't exist, already changed. But I don't know because I don't exist anymore. I don't exist anymore. As if falling into a dead end, Lamias vaguely grasped something, but she couldn't break through the fog in front of her. Musha was just in front of her, floating and sitting cross-legged like a holy god, deep and needed to be respected. She was scared and subconsciously stepped back. Everything that happened in this empty room, for the silver warrior Maya, who might be her previous life, everything seemed so illusory. Finally, she stepped back to the exit of the empty room. She turned around and wanted to leave, but she stopped again. She suddenly turned around and stared at Musha. She took a deep breath and said, "Don't you want to know what will happen in the future?" Musha said indifferently, "Since you can return to this era, since you still exist now, it means that no matter what I know from you, I can't change anything about the future. Whether I know or not, the result is the same. I will choose not to know. Why? At least, there is still hope for the unknown in my heart." Musha shook her head, her body slowly descended, and said faintly, "Because I am not a god, just a mortal." Lamias gritted her teeth and said quickly, "In the future, there's almost no record of this era. At least in the human world, they generally don't know about the existence of gods. Even if there's an inhuman and supernatural power, it is still very rare. So, the future may be an era where the gods are not in. As for the direction of this war of gods, I also don't know, but you can—" She was about to say something, but Musha suddenly shook her head. At the same time, Lamias only felt an unprecedented fear spread throughout her body. She looked at her hands in horror, and her hands gradually faded away. What she had said was already the foundation of what she could establish in the future. Lamias was frightened, her lips instinctively closed. Her wildly beating heart and nerves eroded by fear were frantically stopping her from saying what she was about to say. I can't say any more." Lamias's voice could not help but tremble. Musha was deep in thought and muttered, "Regarding this, I was only guessing. But from the looks of it, at least this guess is correct. As expected, there is no way to change the future. Sorry, I can't help you." Lamias took a deep breath. "I don't even know the real reason why I came here." Lamias left, and Musha did not ask her to stay. He stayed alone in the empty room, surrounded by flowers, silently gazing at his sister's body. He walked up, reached out his hand, and stroked the cheek that was still soft even though it had lost its vitality. He softly said, "At least I know that in the future you will still exist." At the last moment before dawn, the gold of Virgo constellation, Master Musha left. When he left, he set a fire, and at the moment of dawn, the body of the former silver fighter, Grus constellation's Maya, was also cremated. In the sacred Saint Galaxy's goddess temple, at the same time, the bell rang. The new Grus constellation succession ceremony was about to begin. The girl was sitting on a platform at the top of the sacred Saint Galaxy's goddess temple. Her legs were kicking casually, and her hands were holding a basin full of food. At this moment, the young girl was eating in big mouthfuls while looking at the busy figures below. "Master Shaji, so you are here. The ceremony is about to begin. Please change your clothes immediately." Behind the girl, several maids were anxiously walking over. Originally, they were going to bathe and change clothes for the new silver fighter, Master Shaji. But when they were bathing, a few pure girls from the temple were blushing and their legs were weak. When they came back to their senses, Master Shaji was already gone. The frightened girls from the temple instantly woke up from some kind of aftertaste of happiness and hurriedly looked around. I am thinking about a very serious problem. The girl shot, Nero said with a deep expression at this time. Master Shaji? The girls from the temple were startled. Nero said seriously, how can I go back? The girls from the temple naturally didn't know what the new silver fighter of Grus constellation was talking about. But the ceremony was about to begin, and this was the descent of the goddess. She would personally host the ceremony, so they couldn't be careless. Thus, the girls instantly mustered up their courage, walked to the side of Master Shaji, and directly lifted her up and dragged her back to the temple. Nero didn't resist. She reminded them that it was a long time ago that she was dragged like this. However, at that time, she was still a member of the Michael Club. In order to become a divine general, she received inhuman training. She would often be beaten half to death, and then be dragged away by others to clean up the mess. If she could be saved, then she would wake up in the infirmary. If she couldn't be saved, then she would either be incinerated or turned into fresh meat for the new species, Prometheus, developed by the club. I don't like being dragged, really, Nero suddenly said. Master Shaji, don't make trouble. Quickly change your clothes. Otherwise, the Lord Officiant will blame us. The girls said anxiously. Really, I will kill you. The girls screamed one after another. They only felt a terrifying panic spread throughout their body. Their strength had been sucked out, and they completely collapsed on the ground. Their bodies were still trembling. Nero slowly stood up, picked up a piece of beeswax from the basin she was holding, and chewed it. Also, when I eat, I don't like to be disturbed. Remember. Yes. Yes. The girls from the temple nodded in horror. Then, the new silver fighter's face appeared as bright as the sun. Just kidding, I am the kindest person in the world. Others call me Holy Shaji. The girls from the temple were still trembling. At this time, a figure slowly walked over, and the girls from the temple knelt down in reverence. The one who came was Master Gold of the Scorpio Temple. You all can leave. She will go back to change her clothes later. Master Gold of the Scorpio Temple said expressionlessly at this time. Not only did the girls disobey, but they also bowed their heads and left quickly. The Gold of the Scorpio Temple. Prince Pu Lin walked in front of Nero and said with a frown, the ceremony is about to begin. You will meet Her Highness the Goddess. So, are you not going to say anything to me? Nero blinked and said, I won't tell you that you can successfully conquer my secret book. Prince Pu Lin only pretended that he didn't hear her and said indifferently, what's your origin? In this war between the gods, which side do you belong to? Is this very important? Nero smiled and said, I won't stop what you want to do, and I will even cooperate with you. Isn't that good? Prince Pulin was silent for a while, then suddenly threw a black dagger at Nero, and the dagger was directly inserted at Nero's feet. Prince Pulin said in a low voice, if you plan to help me, then stab this dagger into the goddess' chest when she personally baptizes you. Nero opened her eyes wide and looked at the dagger on the floor. She looked at Prince Pulin in surprise and said, I didn't expect that you actually... Didn't you say that no matter what I do, you will cooperate with me? Prince Pulin said indifferently. Nero directly pulled out the dagger and then threw it to the ground. You really don't know how to play. What's so fun about stabbing the goddess to death with a dagger? Of course, you will stab with something else. In any case, I'm proficient in 36 plots, 72 postures, and 108 positions. You're looking down on my professional skills. You are looking down on me. I'm angry. I hope you will appear in the ceremony later. After that, Prince Pulin, the young master of the underworld, turned and left. Chapter 1649. Quiet. The voice of the goddess temple officiant was heard in the square. Outside the temple, the warriors of the sanctuary stood neatly. In front of the temple, gold, silver, and bronze were divided into ranks. This would be the most solemn ceremony in the sanctuary in the past 10 years. The majesty of the goddess filled the square. Along with the announcement of the temple officiant, the new heavenly crane constellation wearing a holy white robe finally appeared in the square. Lamia's was in the crowd at this time. She was not qualified to stand at the front, but she was lucky enough to come to a place with a good view. It was a guard who led her to this place, saying that it was Master Musha's idea. Lamia's did not refuse. Anyway, she agreed, and her body did not have the tendency to disappear, so it should be allowed. In fact, if there was the risk of her existence disappearing at any time, Lamia's was not too worried. At least, she could know in advance what she did, which would cause her to not exist in the future. It was equivalent to having a layer of protection. But perhaps there was a more secure possibility for her existence in the future. That was, she directly died in this era. If she died in this era and did not do anything that could change the future, she would be dispensable in history, or even a person who was never recorded. Probably, she would not have a big impact on the future, or even have no impact at all. She tightened the clothes on her body, maybe because of the cold in the morning, but she actually had fighting spirit, and her physical fitness had exceeded the limit of the human body. Obviously, she was not afraid of the cold in the morning. I really don't have that kind of feeling. Lamias silently looked down at the square. Under the escort of a few temple girls, the girl wearing a holy white robe was slowly walking towards the goddess. Suddenly, she had a strange feeling. In her impression, this mysterious girl seemed to be wilder, but at this time, she was as solemn as a saintess, which really made Lamias unable to adapt. Pretentious. Lamias shook her head and withdrew her gaze in disappointment. Then, her eyes moved back and forth in front of the temple, subconsciously searching for Musha's figure. Although Musha was sure that she was the reincarnation of his sister Maya. But for Lamias, this matter still needed to be verified, even if she had a vague feeling that this might be the case. Knowing was one thing, and being able to accept it was another. If he couldn't return to his original era, and could only survive in this chaotic era of gods, wouldn't it be better to rely on Musha's side to survive? If he couldn't find the person he was looking for, at this moment, Musha, who was standing solemnly in front of the divine temple, suddenly looked in the direction of Lamias. Lamias was shocked. This man's superhuman perception was truly awe-inspiring. She quickly collected her thoughts and, like everyone else in the square, quietly watched everything unfold before her eyes. Finally, when the new heavenly crane constellation arrived at the bottom of the steps in front of the temple, accompanied by the radiance released by the temple, the goddess of the sacred region, the wise, pure, and powerful female goddess of Mount Pantheon, slowly walked out. Nero looked up at the figure that was slowly walking out of the stairs. Her holy face suddenly seemed to collapse. TSK, a bad comment for a posture with long purple hair. The girls of the divine temple beside her were stunned, as if they had heard something. They subconsciously looked at the silver lady of heavenly crane constellation. But seeing this lady's holy appearance without any flaws, they couldn't help but feel puzzled. Heavenly crane constellation, Shaji, greets the goddess. At this moment, the chief priest of the divine temple announced loudly again. Nero's expression was natural. She lifted her white long skirt and walked up the stairs leading to the front of the temple. The goddess was silently watching Nero's arrival. This was the quietest moment in the square of the divine temple. Everyone was focused and quiet. They were afraid that they would blaspheme the majesty of the goddess if they made a sound. Finally, Nero arrived in front of the goddess, separated by 3 meters. On both sides, there were 12 golden warriors who stood straight like spears. In this small area, it was as if the heavy pressure of a mountain had condensed. Nero's heart didn't beat. She stood quietly without being scared. At this moment, a girl of the divine temple held a plate with both hands and came to the side of the goddess. There was a mask on the plate. The goddess reached out and held a mask. This mask will accompany you for the rest of your life. It represents the purity and glory of the Silver Lady. Come to my side, I will put on for you. Nero nodded and walked forward a few steps. Under everyone's gaze, she was in front of the goddess, but she suddenly stopped. This made the ceremony stop. The eyes of the golden warriors changed. At this moment, the chief priest hurriedly said, "Lord Shaji, please come forward. I have a question." Nero suddenly opened her mouth. Her voice wasn't loud, but the surrounding golden warriors could hear it. Some powerful warriors under the stairs could also vaguely hear it. How could the goddess not hear it? She was right in front of her, close at hand. "What's the matter?" the goddess asked indifferently. Nero thought for a moment and said, "According to the rules of the sacred region, after wearing this mask, I can't get married? But what if I want to get married? What if I don't like the man who unmasks me, and I can't kill him? I can't wrong myself, right?" Shocked, everyone's jaws dropped. Even with the knowledge of the 12 golden warriors, there were some who opened their mouths slightly at this moment. The goddess seemed to have never thought that someone would ask such a question during this ceremony. But the astonishment only lasted for a moment. As a goddess, she had countless thoughts every second. This astonishment was even difficult to detect. "If you want to have love, you can wait until you retire," the goddess said indifferently. "The sacred region doesn't limit the retirement of the Saint Seiya." Huh? Nero blinked. "It's not a lifelong system? Will my benefits be reduced after I retire? I'm also very confused." The new Grus constellation. "Please don't be presumptuous in front of the goddess." A low voice came. Among the 12 golden warriors, Nero saw one of them who had just spoken. Nero stuck out her tongue at the slightly angry golden warrior. "At first glance, I know that you don't have a good relationship with women. At this time, you actually didn't stand up for me to make a wave of favorable impression. You deserve to be single." "You." The golden warrior who was rebuked gritted his teeth. At first, he was just dissatisfied, but now there was real anger in his eyes. How could the golden warriors think that there would be someone who would commit such atrocities during such a ceremony? How could the inheritance ceremony of a silver warrior be trifled with? Not to mention that this ceremony was hosted by the goddess herself, which was even more supreme glory. But such a sudden situation was obviously not expected by everyone. In an instant, the goddess who had thousands of thoughts couldn't help but be silent at this time. The goddess looked at Nero, still with an unworldly look. There was no joy, no anger, only calmness. The goddess waved her hand slightly at this time to calm down the somewhat irritable golden warriors. Then she looked at Nero and said, "Come to me. I will answer your questions." Nero frowned, but she still walked over. She had completely arrived in front of the goddess. She was completely close to her. At this moment, Nero suddenly showed a bright smile, but at the same time, her palm contained a shocking, killing intent. A black dagger suddenly appeared. "How dare you?" In an instant, more than 5 golden warriors burst out, a terrifying fighting spirit at the same time. The 5 golden warriors attacked together and were about to capture Nero. The new heavenly crane constellation dared to take out a weapon to assassinate during an audience with the goddess. This almost instantly exploded the golden warriors' brains. Unfortunately, this new heavenly crane constellation was really too close to the goddess. At the moment when the golden warriors were shocked and frightened, the new heavenly crane constellation did something that shocked everyone again. That dagger that was supposed to stab the goddess, was actually raised high at this time. "I want to report." Raising the black dagger in her hand, Nero shouted at this time, "A golden warrior threatened me to assassinate the goddess during this ceremony." Fists, palms, and even weapons. The golden warriors who attacked suddenly stopped abruptly. If they were a moment slower, these fists, palms, and even weapons would obviously directly smash the head of this new heavenly crane constellation. "What did you say?" The goddess frowned. At the moment when Nero took out the dagger, she was not afraid. Although it was just a clone that descended from the Mount Pantheon to the human world, there was an insurmountable gap between gods and mortals. In the face of assassination, the goddess was not afraid at all. But the dagger in Nero's hand vaguely revealed an ominous feeling, the smell of the underworld. "I want to report, it's this person." Nero shouted at this time, "It's him. He threatened me. If I don't do this, he will put me under his banner in the future. He wants to tie me up with chains and torture me with a brush made of black goat eyelashes every day. He also wants me to wear a holy garment and kneel down to suck him. It's this person. You're lying." The golden warrior that Nero pointed at was the one who angrily rebuked Nero at the beginning. Now that Nero pointed at him sternly, this golden warrior only felt a surge of coldness. Regardless of whether this matter was true or not, even if it was obvious that this was a false accusation, after today, his reputation would be stained. Benduff. The other golden warriors looked at this golden warrior at this time. Don't listen to her nonsense. How can I do something that betrays the goddess? She must be a spy sent by the underworld. The golden warrior that was framed. Benduff's eyes seemed to be spitting fire at this moment. Capture. The golden warrior of Virgo Temple, Musa, who was silent, suddenly said at this time, Grus Constellation Sol. Nero didn't resist at all. She directly threw down the dagger and lowered her hands. The golden warriors that made a move immediately captured her directly. What I said is all true. Nero's eyes were red at this time. She said miserably, a small character like me, after going through hardships, finally achieved my dream to become a glorious silver warrior. But in front of me, the golden warrior that deserves my respect told me that if I don't do this, my dream will be destroyed. He is a golden warrior. If he says that I am a spy from the underworld, will anyone believe me? Not only will I lose the opportunity to become a silver warrior, even will I become a sinner of the sacred realm, unable to wash away my stain in my life. My every move is under the surveillance of this Lord. I can only submit, but I am not resigned. I have been waiting for an opportunity. I want to expose the ugliness of this golden warrior in front of everyone. I want to tell everyone who is the one who defected to the underworld, who is the one who fell from the sacred realm. Even if I die, I will not hesitate. Changed. Some people's gazes towards this golden warrior, Benduff, seemed to have vaguely changed. Although it was not to the extent of believing in the new silver warrior, at least it made people start to doubt her. Don't listen to her nonsense. This is framing. Framing. This is a conspiracy. Nero stared at Benduff at this time and smiled sadly. I will use my life to prove my innocence. With that, a cold air suddenly emitted from Nero's body. In just an instant, Nero completely turned into an ice crystal. What did she do? She actually chose to freeze herself and end her life to prove herself. Changed again. Originally, it was just a trace of doubt, but now it had changed. Looking at the change in the gazes of his colleagues, Benduff seemed to have been stimulated by something. His face turned pale, and he subconsciously took half a step back. Benduff, could it be you? I. This golden warrior opened his mouth at this time, but couldn't say anything. He didn't know how to explain this matter. Nonsense. The voice of the goddess suddenly sounded. Then she waved her hand, and the frozen state of Nero was instantly unfrozen. Looking at the confused Nero, the goddess said indifferently, Maybe someone really instructed you, but it can't be Benduff. The farce should be over. New heavenly crane constellation. Tell me your origin. How did you? At the same time, the goddess suddenly tapped the scepter in her hand. The moment the scepter touched the floor, a ripple instantly spread out. Nero's expression changed slightly, and she jumped up in an instant. She floated in mid-air, and the ripple didn't end. It suddenly broke away from the ground and gathered towards her again. Without saying a word, Nero pulled out Yamato and slashed at the ripple. Bang dash! The air wave instantly exploded above the temple of the goddess. In the chaotic airflow, Nero's voice sounded again. It's not fun, let's go. Stay. Seeing that Nero instantly shot out of the Holy Regent Citadel, Musa made his move. He stretched out his hand in the air, and a huge transparent palm instantly condensed in the air and directly grasped Nero in the palm. Nero, who was in a predicament, directly transformed into Yamato without thinking. Yamato merged into her body and turned into a sharp blade armor, directly breaking the huge, transparent palm. Musa frowned slightly and rushed towards Nero. The two, in the blink of an eye, left the citadel of the Holy Regent. Musa has already made his move. She can't escape. At this time, the golden warriors withdrew their gazes, and when they were about to ask the goddess for instructions, they saw a scene that made them angry, frightened, and unbelievable. Aruba. What are you doing? That was the golden warrior of the Taurus palace, Aruba. At this time, he was standing behind the goddess, and the pitch-black dagger in his hand pierced through the goddess's chest from the back. Blood dyed the goddess's white robe red. Everyone's eyes were about to burst, but at this time, Aruba of the Taurus palace stood there like a puppet with lifeless eyes. A trace of pain flashed across the goddess's face. The body that descended was heavily injured, and it would harm the original body. She looked around and finally sighed. I didn't expect this. It seems that Uncle Hades cherishes you very much, right? Young master of the underworld, you will only escalate the war between the gods. Do you know that? The goddess's eyes dimmed, and her body turned into a ball of light that instantly shot into the sky, returning to Mount Pantheon. At the same time, the place where the goddess disappeared shot down a white light that directly shone on the golden warrior of the Scorpio Palace, Romy, who was in the crowd. At this time, this golden warrior's body emitted traces of black mist, and his appearance changed little by little, revealing his true appearance. You, the young master of the underworld? Aruba, Romy is already? Damn it! The underworld broke the agreement. The enraged golden warriors unleashed their fighting spirit. As for the silver warriors, bronze warriors, and even the warriors in the square, those who reacted quickly all unleashed their fighting spirit. Prince Poulin frowned as he watched all of this. He looked at the direction where the goddess clone disappeared. Without a doubt, this would hurt the goddess of war on Mount Pantheon, but Prince Poulin couldn't feel happy at this time. So, Prince Poulin muttered to himself, the one who wants to fight the most is you, Athena. He didn't think that Aruba would succeed, and he didn't believe that Yarn wouldn't cause him any accidents. Therefore, he had prepared a backup plan long ago. But Aruba succeeded, which could only mean one thing. The goddess did it on purpose. As if to prove his conjecture, the sky of the Holy Realm suddenly darkened, and then directly cracked open. The crack in the sky seemed to tear the entire human world apart. In the huge crack between the rolling dark clouds, a dazzling golden light shone down. At the crack, a golden figure stood high, holding the scepter of victory in her hand. Her divine power descended upon the earth in a mighty manner. The goddess, the true body of the goddess on Mount Pantheon, had directly descended upon the human world at this time. The young master of the underworld killed a god, breaking the agreement. Damn it! A golden light shot out from the goddess scepter. In front of the temple, Prince Poulin took a deep breath and faced the power of the goddess with a punch. This power had obviously exceeded the limits of what the human world could withstand. The human world that had become unstable due to the appearance of the goddess' true body was now in an even more turbulent state. The fist collided with the goddess' divine power. In just an instant, Prince Poulin was directly blasted to the ground, smashing into the temple of the goddess directly. Prince Poulin, who had fallen into a deep pit, climbed up with difficulty, looking like a bloodied man. No wonder Father is so afraid of you. This power, even compared to the master of the sky. He spat out another mouthful of blood, but the second light of the goddess' divine power had already shot down again. As the young master of the underworld, did he have a real death? Prince Poulin himself was not sure, but when the death that he had never felt before approached, some images suddenly flashed in Prince Poulin's mind. A peaceful family with a father, a mother who was about to give birth, and a kind grandmother. Someone shouted his name, Joe. Golden light shot down. A moment ago, Holy Realm, outside the city, Nero was slapped to the ground by a huge palm in the sky. Nero, who was completely lying on the ground, looked at the sky at this time and blinked. The gold of Virgo slowly descended at this time. Not planning to run anymore? Musha said indifferently. Nero directly deactivated the Yama form, sat up, patted the dust off her body, looked at Musha and said, I'm thinking about a very serious matter. What is it? Nero crossed her arms and frowned, looking pensive. When my boss made me out, he must have cut corners. I can't even beat you, but I can't kill you. Musha shook her head. Nero opened her mouth and said in surprise, How do you know? Feeling. Musha said in a low voice. I can't suppress you, but I can't completely kill you. Or, with my current strength, I can't erase the foundation of your existence. But it doesn't matter as long as I can suppress you. Saying that, Musha attacked again. The huge palm formed again. Nero was quick-witted and blurted out. The gold of Virgo is called Shaka. The palm formed in the sky suddenly stopped. Musha frowned, and in an instant, as if she had suffered a heavy blow, she spat out a mouthful of blood. As if the heavens couldn't tolerate her, the gold saint robe of Virgo temple shattered at this time. She was about to say something, but she was shocked and suddenly looked at the sky, only to see a golden light sprinkling down from the cracked sky. Musha lowered her head and muttered something. Then she glanced at Nero and immediately left, returning to the holy citadel. After a while, Nero got up from the ground. She could feel the vast divine power brought by the descent of the goddess' true body. At this time, a huge force of death burst out and rushed to the divine power of the goddess in the sky. It was Prince Poulin who had recovered his true appearance. Old Ha, I finally saw you. Nero glared at this time and spat out the remote control in her body. Without saying anything, she rushed to the figure who was waving his fist at the sky. Bring me back, Nero shouted and ran to the holy citadel again. In the beginning, the shop owner and Miss Maid Eleanor watched everything that happened in the holy citadel expressionlessly. I didn't expect that a dimension observer would be born in this era. The gold of Virgo temple. Musha? The shop owner whispered at this time. Musha, he is... Miss Eleanor was surprised at this time and immediately said in a low voice, the dimension observer is not tolerated by the will of the world. He might not be able to survive this war. The shop owner did not deny or confirm, but he was deep in thought. But strangely, the shop owner and Miss Eleanor seemed to ignore Nero on the ground. The Netherworld King is here, Master, Miss Eleanor suddenly said in a low voice. The shop owner was silent for a while before waving his hand. Go. The gods on Mount Pantheon will need you, Eleanor. Yes. Eleanor nodded, turned around, and left. There was only one reason why the gods on Mount Pantheon would need Miss Eleanor. They had a request. The shop owner looked at everything in the holy citadel calmly. Looking at the young master of the netherworld who was waving his fist at the goddess, he whispered to himself, this space-time chaos started from you. Then, let this be the star of the backup. Restart. Name. The shop owner lowered his head and pondered. Then, he had an idea and continued in a low voice. 003, Beta Whirl Start. When the button was pressed and the light appeared, Nero did not feel any attack, but she instinctively felt a very dangerous aura. Or rather, she felt a terrifying power. In front of this power, she would not have any ability to resist. In front of this terrifying power, she would become no different from an ant. This was a mighty power that could treat everything as ants. Perhaps her cultivation was still shallow, so she could not tell what this power was. But she had already remembered this feeling. After the light disappeared, Nero frowned and looked up at the sky and the surroundings. Joe was right beside her, but Olha was gone. She looked at her palm dumbfoundedly. There should be another remote control here, but it disappeared inexplicably at this time. This made Nero unable to react. For a long time, Nero remained silent. Finally, little Joe woke up. He looked at everything around him in horror. The dark red sky, the scorched earth, and grabbed the big sister's trousers in fear. Big sister, where's this place? Don't be noisy. I'm thinking about something. Nero rarely did not scold or laugh, but she was like an ordinary person. Thinking about something, Joe raised his head in puzzlement and looked at the big sister's face. Nero said blankly at this time, I'm not. Black Soul? At the same time, a huge monster with 3 heads spewing flames descended from the sky and appeared in front of Nero and Joe. I'm the great guardian of Hell's Gate, Cerberus. Nero felt her state at this time, then blinked and picked up Joe without saying a word. Brat, run. I don't have the strength to fight now. But the next second, Nero was directly pressed to the ground by Cerberus's claws. There are actually living beings on the ground entering the underworld. I want to offer you to the great underworld master. Chapter 1650. The young master of the underworld had successfully blocked the goddess' first attack, but he was already seriously injured. However, the goddess' second attack came one after another. The powerful divine light illuminated the entire sky of the sanctuary. The gold fighters of the 12 zodiacs had solemn expressions. This war between the gods might turn into an unknown state because of the young master of the underworld's fall. The second divine attack had already landed, and the goddess temple that had stood tall in the sanctuary for God knows how many years turned into nothingness in an instant. The young master of the underworld has no chance of surviving. The gold fighter sighed. The goddess divine might was still vast and mighty at this moment. They were about to kneel down and worship her. But at this moment, a feeling of terror that made their hearts beat wildly and uncontrollably followed. It was as if they had heard the call of death in an instant. The sound of wailing filled the entire sanctuary. Then, black snow silently fell. Black snow? When the sanctuary fighters in front of the temple square subconsciously reached out their hands and let their palms fall into the black snow in the sky, death had already approached. The fighters fell without warning. They lost their breath, lost the possibility of survival, and simply died. Only the gold fighters of the 12 zodiacs were barely holding on with the divine power contained in their saint robes. However, the divine light circulating on the saint robes also dimmed as the black snow fell. In just a few breaths, the vast sanctuary was like a dead city. It's him! It's him! It's him! In the square, before the black snow fell, the young master of the underworld rushed towards the goddess with his fist. The silent Lamias suddenly felt her heart beating wildly again. She had already experienced this feeling of her heart beating wildly once. That was when she met the mysterious female warrior, Shaul, in the trial maze. But now, it seemed that Shaul was still not the one she was looking for. To her, perhaps Shaul only had a special meaning and was not the person she was looking for. The person she was looking for was the man who met the goddess with his fist, the young master of the underworld. Lamias felt numb. This feeling was completely different from when she met Shaul, and the answer that was on the verge of coming out of her mouth almost made it difficult for her to breathe. It's him. I finally found him. I found it. I can go back now. Lamias shuddered, but she didn't know how to approach it. At this moment, the young master of the underworld was swinging his fist at the goddess. Oh, goddess, they were all existences that could kill him countless times with a single sneeze. Finally, the underworld's young master was blasted down by the goddess, followed by a second beam of divine light. Lamias's eyes flashed with despair. If the underworld's young master were to die in the hands of the goddess, then her mission would be a failure, and she would forever lose the possibility of returning to her original era. What should I do? Lamias fell to the ground absent-mindedly. At the same time, black snow began to slowly fall from the sky above the Saint region. Lamias shuffled backward in fear as she watched the sacred warriors mysteriously fall down one after another. Even the guards who brought her into the square had fallen down as well. She should have fallen as well. But she was still conscious, and her life wasn't taken away. There was only one reason. Her body wasn't touched by the black snow. It was as if something was protecting her, causing the black snow to slowly bounce off Lamias's body as it fell. Lamias looked at her body in shock. Suddenly, she seemed to feel something and turned her head to look, only to see a man in white standing behind her. Shah. Because of this man's existence, the black snow didn't touch her body. Lamias looked at the white-robed Shah in front of her, wanting to say something, but hesitated. Just like her, when the black snow fell, it automatically bounced off Shah's body. Only then did Lamias remember that Shah really was spotless, clean, bright, and had never been tainted by a single speck of dirt. What happened? Lamias asked in fear. The underworld king has descended. Shah didn't look at Lamias, and only stared at the goddess in the sky, who had broken through the boundary between the god realm and the human realm. The underworld king. Lamia's opened her mouth. At this time, the goddess's divine might was activated again, and the goddess's voice echoed above the sanctuary. Hades, Hades, you're the one who caused this catastrophe. You broke the agreement between the master gods and interfered in the human realm's battle. The eyes of the goddess were now looking at the destroyed sanctuary temple. On the ground, Prince Poulin, who was the underworld's young master, was seriously injured. However, there was a stalwart figure standing beside him. Father, you have descended to the human realm? Prince Poulin crawled up with great difficulty. He knew that the underworld king's appearance had blocked the goddess's second ray of divine light for him. The underworld king. Hades lowered his head to look at Prince Poulin and said indifferently, "You are my child. Even if you die in battle, you should stand on the ground." Prince Poulin lowered his head and said with a bitter expression, "I'm sorry, father. I thought I could seriously injure Athena. I didn't expect her to use this as a reason to start the great war of the three realms." Hades waved his hand and made Prince Poulin stop talking. He then flew into the sky and looked at the true body of the goddess in the sky. In the blink of an eye, a long time has passed. You have finally grown to the point where you can make your father make some kind of decision. Don't make a mistake, Hades, the goddess said indifferently. The underworld king smiled and said, "What? Have you forgotten how you were born? After all, you were born from your father's head. My relationship with my father is very good. You don't have to worry about me, Hades. Now, you have invaded the underworld and caused great suffering in the human realm and the divine realm. Even if you are the god in charge of death, you can't wash away your sins. Uncle Hades, please stop in time and accept the punishment of the god's mountain to wash away your sins. Since I am the god of death, how can there be suffering in the world?" The underworld king shook his head. "You said they are dead, but they are alive in the underworld and have become my people. It's just a change of place and a change of faith. How can there be death?" At this moment, a huge lightning bolt shot out from the crack in the sky and struck the underworld king in the sky. The underworld king was unmoved. The death energy on his body flashed, and the lightning bolt was instantly annihilated. The underworld king shook his head and looked at the crack in the sky. He said indifferently, "You are always so impatient. Athena and I are catching up." "Hades!" An angry voice came from the crack, and a pair of huge palms stretched out from the crack. The huge palms tore the crack open again. Finally, a huge face filled with anger appeared in the sky. Instantly, thousands of lightning bolts danced in the sky, as if doomsday had arrived. The goddess frowned and looked at the huge face. She couldn't help but say in a low voice, "Don't let your anger blind your eyes, Father God. Die." As if it didn't hear the call of the goddess daughter, the huge face in the sky twisted in fury. At this moment, endless lightning bolts struck down. A second ago, it seemed like doomsday had arrived. Now it was the real doomsday. The goddess watched in horror as the lightning bolts devoured the lives in the human realm. It wasn't just the sanctuary. Far away, it was the human battlefields and even the human kingdoms. "Father God, calm down," the goddess called out again. She felt that the master of the gods' mountain had endless godly power, and his godly might kept rising as if there was no limit to it. It was far beyond her expectations. "Give up, Athena." Pluto shook his head. "Look at your father god. Don't you understand? Right now, he, the master of the sky, has been reduced to a puppet of power." "What did you say?" The goddess' expression changed. Then, she remembered the pure small world that she had bought in private and was startled. "Could it be the world outside?" Pluto said faintly. "It's far more horrifying than you can imagine. You've been there, right? But you came back like a stray dog. This godly nation and godly system are as weak as child's play in front of the truly powerful existences in the void. Zeus. So, you're so eager to get the mansion of the dead. Hades, die." The huge face in the sky was enraged again, and the lightning bolts that filled the sky grew crazily again. "Hades, die." Amidst the lightning bolts, dozens of huge light shadows rushed out from the cracks in the sky. They were the master gods of the gods' mountain. Why are you all? The goddess' expression changed drastically. She could clearly sense that the gods were as crazy as her father god. Have you all gone mad? At this moment, Pluto remained calm in the face of the master of the skies, angry glare, and the madness of the gods' mountain. Finally, it's time to destroy this so-called weakness. Pluto sighed softly. Then he waved his hand. Beside him, the space suddenly distorted, and a figure slowly walked out. The figure was lifeless, and his eyes were hollow like an empty shell. On the ground, when Prince Poulin saw this figure, his expression changed drastically. He saw another version of himself. Pluto lowered his head and glanced at Prince Poulin. Then, he suddenly said, "He might be your brother. Who knows? He also has the status of Pluto and the same power as me. So he is also Pluto. But now, he is the ultimate weapon to destroy the gods, Pluto." Prince Poulin's face turned pale. His mind was in a mess, and his consciousness was almost washed away by the chaos. He almost fainted. Go back. Go back to the mansion of the dead." Pluto waved his hand and shot a black light at Prince Poulin. "If I can't go back, the mansion of the dead will truly belong to you, child." "Father," Prince Poulin exclaimed, but the black light had already shot toward him. A powerful force instantly opened the passage to the mansion of the dead and pulled him in. At this moment, a petite figure shot over. "Old hot, quick! Activate this broken thing. I want to go back." "Nero!" Prince Poulin instinctively looked in the direction of the voice. He saw a familiar face appear in front of him and reach out to him. But in the next second, the passage to the mansion of the dead had completely pulled him in. Nero was still one step slower after all. The body that rushed forward passed through the air and then stopped. Nero stared blankly at the disappearing black light and Prince Poulin in silence. She lowered her head and looked at the broken arm. This arm was directly annihilated the moment it touched the black light. About half of it was annihilated. At this moment, the arm that had been annihilated quickly grew back. The body of the source of the foreign body was able to transform between the virtual and the real. Even if a part of it was cut off, it could still be equalized back. But my remote control. Nero looked at the palm that had grown back in annoyance, but it was also empty. She couldn't help but show a trace of annoyance. But why? Is there another old Damn it. Boss, when you made me, not only did you cut corners, but you also didn't give me any IQ points. I can't figure it out. I really can't go back. Nero suddenly fell to the ground like an abandoned child. She looked absent-mindedly at the gods and the sky falling. Death was coming, accompanied by Nero's wail-like complaints. The real wail of death sounded between heaven and earth. The black snow had turned into a black blizzard at this time. And all of this was because of the figure that was like an empty shell beside the Lord of the Dead. The ultimate weapon that destroyed the gods, Lord of the Dead. Finally, because of the madness of the gods, the human world was broken. When more cracks appeared in the sky, the earth, and even the entire place that the eyes could see, something broke the space and rushed in crazily. Primordial devil of the void. How could it be? It seemed to be the voice of the Lord of the sky. The earth shattered, the god kingdom was classified, and the void swallowed the surroundings. A piece of land cracked at this time and fell into the endless darkness. Nero was sitting on this piece of land at this time, hesitating and helpless. The Lord of the Dead has fallen. The era of the gods will eventually pass. The once glorious god system will be lost forever. Is this the end? On the broken earth, Musha, who was dressed in white, was silent at this time. He just held the thing that the goddess personally handed to him when she descended. I will keep my promise. My lord. You want to go? Where are you going? Please take me with you. I don't want to die. Lamias looked at him in horror. She instinctively felt Musha's intention to leave. Like grabbing a life-saving straw, she quickly ran to Musha's side. I can't save you. I don't even know if I can escape this disaster. Musha shook his head and waved his hand, bouncing Lamias away. I hope you can survive. Wait, The voice suddenly stopped. A huge crystal instantly sealed Lamias in it, completely isolating her from everything in the outside world. And Musha had already disappeared in this god kingdom that was about to break. "Father!" Excited shouts rang out in the palace of the underworld. A black light flashed, and Prince Pulin fell to the empty main hall. He had an impulse to join the battle, but at this time, his brain felt like it was about to explode. Some of the sealed memories of the past began to surface. The memories before he became the underworld's young master. Prince Pulin fell to the ground in pain, and on the ground there was a broken arm. Prince Pulin looked at this broken arm in a daze, only to see the broken arm turn into mist and dissipate. And on the ground, there was a strange little box left behind. 2 Hell Kings. How? Mayor Lada felt his scalp go numb. It was because of Teacher Pulin who was standing beside him, and also because of the man in formal attire who took off his hat and revealed his appearance. At this time, Teacher Pulin was silent. The man in formal attire shook his head and said, "I suddenly feel like eating ice cream." After saying that, the man in formal attire stretched out his hand. The door of a convenience store in front of the town square instantly opened, and 3 ice creams flew out from the refrigerator. He tore open the packaging, threw one to the black cat, and ate one himself. Then he extended the 3rd ice cream to Teacher Pulin and asked with a smile, "Do you want to eat?" #PS 2180 seconds. Chapter 1651. Mr. Pulin shook his head at the man's kind invitation. "No, thank you. I'm afraid of tooth decay." Only children are afraid of tooth decay from eating too much sweets. The man smiled and said, "Are you wondering who I am? I'm really curious." Mr. Pulin nodded. The man shook his head and said, "But I've lost interest in telling you, because similar things have happened too many times. All your reactions are tasteless to me. So this time, you'd better continue to be curious. Of course, you can call me Joe." "Joe?" Mr. Pulin was startled. He seemed to have thought of something and said subconsciously, "Mr. Smith's missing son is also called Joe." The man in the suit. Joe suddenly looked up at the sky and said calmly, "In about 10 seconds, another group of guests will arrive." "Oh no, it's just one guest." Mr. Pulin showed a puzzled expression, but Joe and the black cat were busy eating their ice cream. Time passed quickly, and 10 seconds had passed. "What's that?" Milado exclaimed. Under the night sky, he saw a gigantic machine suffused with a metallic luster. At this moment, under the effect of the thrusters, it was rapidly flying over. This scene was somewhat like a sci-fi movie, making Teacher Pulin slightly move his lips. Well, he knew that there were many strange things in this world, so he didn't care if there were a few more. This is the hidden power of the Black Order. Joe's eyes narrowed slightly. The chief of the Black Order, a human with a very strong psychic power. But humans are a very mysterious creature. They have a low starting point, but their potential is one of the highest. So, Joe said calmly, "So, it's not strange for one or several powerful humans to be born in an era. Like me?" Mr. Pulin said suddenly. "You?" Joe shook his head. "You're not. Strictly speaking, you're not a product of this era. Why should I tell you this? This is a rather boring matter. Why one is only your strength." Teacher Pulin wasn't too shaken at this moment, probably due to his self-confidence in his ability to cause all living things to wither and bring death to the world. In his impression, when he had traveled all over the world in the past, there had always been some magicians or sorcerers who didn't know the depth of their abilities who wished to seize his innate ability. But the grass on the grave was already very tall. "Let's deal with the chief of the Black Order first." Joe sighed. "Next, there's a priest that's more troublesome. This is a guy that requires a certain amount of effort to suppress every time." Mr. Pulin couldn't help but frown. Was he talking about Father Stella? But at this moment, after the black cat swallowed the ice cream in one gulp, it instantly jumped up. Teacher Pulin clearly saw that small wings had sprouted from the hind legs of this black cat. In the night sky, the ultimate soldiers were like the knights who were reuniting on an ancient battlefield. Among the many powerful ultimate soldiers, there was also an extra-large ultimate soldier that stood out from the rest. It was like a king, the emperor, The chief of the Black Order, whose life could only be counted in hours, could no longer use any means to prolong his life. At this moment, his eyes were red. His ears, nose, and even his eyes were bleeding bright red because of the crazy surge of his spiritual power. What was the real feeling of a lamp running out of oil? It was that even the wick was about to burn out. Cough, cough. I could still hold on. Chief Charles was also a legend. His life could be traced back to the first wave of immigration from Europe to North America. There was no doubt that he was favored by God. He had extraordinary talent since young and knew how to explore the potential of his spiritual power. He was discovered by the previous chief of the Black Order and had been secretly training to inherit the position of chief. Charles did not disappoint the previous chief. He quickly replaced him and successfully led the Black Order to take root in North America. He lived in seclusion, always working hard to complete the Black congregation's great plan of 100 years. Before his body began to crumble, he was practically a flawless chief of cultivators, dedicating everything he had to the chief of cultivators until he understood that there would be a day when he would die. But his spiritual power was still growing, as if there was no limit. This was the most desperate thing for Charles. His body could no longer bear it, but his power was still increasing. The world shouldn't be like this. In the cockpit of the ultimate soldier, King Emperor, which was like an emperor, the chief of the Black Order, whose body was full of infusion needles. Every second, he consumed hundreds of millions of precious medicine. At this moment, he only had eyes in front of him, as if he was possessed. I want a new life. My life can't end like this. I want a new life. I want a new life. I want a new life. I want. At this moment, a black cat appeared directly on the screen of the cockpit. This black cat was stepping on the head of an ultimate soldier in front of him. It was as if it was looking directly at the chief of the Black Order through the screen. All of a sudden, Charles felt his heart palpitate. That was because of his powerful psychic energy that allowed him to sense danger in the capital. This black cat had the power to kill him. In his long life, Charles had made similar judgments several times. It was also because of this that he successfully escaped death several times. But at this moment, even if he escaped, he still had to face imminent death. No one could stop me, let alone a cat. The cerebral cortex of the furious chief of the Black Order was fluctuating wildly. A large number of ultimate soldiers received the order at this moment, and their electronic eyes flashed red in an instant. The same lines, the same bald head who only knows how to roar incompetently. I've had enough. The black cat spoke human language at this moment. Charles almost thought that he had misheard. In the blink of an eye, the black cat jumped out from the ultimate soldier standing on the ground. Its claws seemed to have the attribute of incomparable sharpness. Those ultimate soldier armors that were clearly much stronger than the so-called strongest alloy in the world were easily torn apart by its claws. As for weapons, at this moment, facing a small black cat that had randomly entered the formation, the weapons that the ultimate soldiers were equipped with actually brought about a destructive disaster. Looking at those ultimate soldiers that were accidentally hit by stray bullets, had their skulls torn apart by the black cat, or had their vital organs bitten off by the black cat, Charles and the Emperor stared with his eyes wide open. He was not feeling pity for these ultimate soldiers that he had spent a huge amount of money and manpower to create, but he was furious that someone was blocking his path of rebirth, and it was a cat. Do you know? There aren't many who can match my speed. Unknowingly, the black cat was already standing in front of the Emperor's cockpit door. Its claws directly pierced into the cockpit door and directly tore it open with brute force. In the cockpit, the extremely fragile Charles was instantly exposed to the air. Anger, fear, disbelief, a variety of expressions flashed across his face, and finally, this chief of the Black Order's rationality collapsed. Die! In an instant, a huge storm formed in the sky above the town. Even the sea was shaking violently at this moment, as if a hurricane had arrived. The moment Charles shouted the word die, his brain expanded. The result of the expansion was that the fragile brain, due to the sturdiness of the skull, could not withstand the pressure and directly began to explode from the inside. At this moment, the powerful spiritual energy was like a building that collapsed directly. The hurricane had only just formed when it dissipated. In the Emperor's cockpit, Charles's body had completely lost all signs of life. His head had already exploded, and blood and brain matter directly stained the cockpit. The black cat somewhat disdainfully pinched its nose, shook its head, and said, "What a pity! This is almost the power of the gods. You're the most depressing one to be afraid of death." Shaking its head, the black cat finally jumped into the cockpit. The ultimate soldiers fell from the sky one after another. They crashed into the streets and houses of the town, causing a lot of damage. Finally, the Emperor also fell together. The moment the Emperor landed, the black cat had already returned to the square and came to Joe's side. At this moment, the black cat's mouth was holding a cold white orb of light that faintly revealed a trace of golden light. "You've worked hard, Hermes," Joe said softly, waving his hand. The orb of light in the black cat's mouth flew directly into his palm. In the palm of his hand, a small box with a red and blue button instantly absorbed the orb of light. The black cat did not say anything, as if it had done something insignificant. It began to lick its paws, and then wipe its face. "What is that?" Teacher Pullen looked at the box in Joe's hand, feeling that it was somewhat mysterious. Joe looked at him and, after a moment of silence, said, "A broken item." "Broken?" Teacher Pullen was even more shocked. "It's broken, but it can still be used." Joe smiled. "It is something a very interesting big sister left for me. Unfortunately, I will probably not be able to see her again." "Why?" Teacher Pullen was surprised. "You also possess the power of death. You can summon the dead." "Because it is broken." Joe shook his head. "So, I will not be able to see her. I can only—" Joe did not say what he could only do. At this moment, another person had entered the square of the town. Holy Knight Wasco. However, what caught everyone's attention was that this holy knight, Sir Wasco, had a self-portrait of Father Stella pasted on his body. The style of the portrait was quite unique. "Evil One, it's you? Are you toying with the souls of the people of this town?" Wasco completely adhered to the virtues of the Holy Knight of the Holy Church. At this moment, holy power erupted from his body. "I will never allow evil to wreak havoc." "Holy Knight." Joe looked at Wasco and suddenly smiled. "Speaking of which, I have to thank the Holy Church. After all, you have brought me a few descending angels." "What did you say?" Wasco could not help but be shocked and angry. However, Joe did not say anything. He reached out towards Wasco, as if he had directly grabbed Wasco's heart. This veteran holy knight who had trained his body to be as hard as steel suddenly fell to the ground in pain. At the same time, the self-portrait of Father Strahl that Vasco had pasted on his body suddenly started to burn. When the portrait was completely burned, his body started to tremble violently as he let out a low roar of pain. Joe slightly closed his palms and pulled across the air, as if something was about to be extracted from Wasco's body. However, at this moment, a small black shadow pounced directly towards Joe. Seeing this, the black cat Hermes jumped up and collided with the small black shadow. After the black cat Hermes landed on the ground, it subconsciously looked at its forelimb. A deep wound had already appeared. The black cat looked at the front solemnly. On the floor of the square, there was a golden layer that was much fatter than it. Tom Cruise. At this moment, Tom Cruise's eyes were shining. Looking at the black cat, his eyes were full of desire for food. "I might not be tasty." The black cat Hermes shook its head and licked the wound on its forelimb. The wound had already healed. At the same time, something seemed to have bounced Joe's palm away. He retracted his palm and shook his head helplessly. Holy Knight Wasco's face was still pale, but the feeling of death had disappeared from his heart. All this was because the palm on his shoulder came from Father Stella's palm. At this moment, Father Stella was wearing a black priestly outfit and running, holding a thick Bible in his hand. However, Wasco clearly saw that this old man had a Playboy magazine in between the Bible. But at least this guy was wearing leather shoes this time, instead of running out in flip-flops. At least he didn't completely throw away the Holy Church's face. Stella. Wasco wanted to say something, but stopped. Don't worry, for the sake of your sister. The priest drew a slanted cross in front of his chest, and then nodded. I will give you a 20% discount for the appearance fee. The veteran holy knight instantly withdrew his touched heart and wanted to stab this old bastard's ass with his sword. However, Father Stella didn't want to waste time with Wasco. He waved his hand and pasted an even more unique self-portrait on Wasco's back. He then snorted and said, Trash Wasco, get out of my way. As a background, you should have the self-awareness of being a background. Give me a passerby's exclamation and let me feel good. Why don't you go die? The furious veteran holy knight couldn't care less about the enemy in front of him. He immediately had the urge to draw his sword and fight to the death with this bastard priest. Go help Tom Cruise, Father Stella said coldly. Wasco frowned, then took a deep breath and quietly approached Tom Cruise. The priest looked at Joe, then looked at Teacher Poulin and couldn't help but frown. Are you brothers? Teacher Poulin shook his head. It was unknown whether he didn't know or denied it. Joe just smiled. Father Stella, thank you for baptizing me. It's a pity that you can't be my godfather. What the hell? Father Stella glared at Joe. Don't pull strings here. I have to baptize dozens of newborns in a year. Why should I remember you? Don't compare me with those trash priests who like beautiful boys. I like beautiful girls. You're always so interesting. Joe laughed happily. Father Stella spat. He really spat, and he spat at Joe. However, this saliva was like a bullet piercing through the air. At the same time, outside the square on the clock tower, Boss Luo slowly sighed at this time, and at the same time released the hand holding Miss Maid. He looked at Yu Yi and showed a smile. Just in time, there is one day left. The reason why he let go of Miss Maid was there was no need to share the vision of the time river with her by holding her hand. The reason was this variable had stopped and stabilized. It will be made up soon. Miss Maid said expressionlessly at this time. She seemed to be a little unhappy for this crazy evaporation of time. However, her heart still ached for him because there was only one day left, and after the conversation just now, the time had already begun to increase. Boss Luo smiled and said, It should be in time to make breakfast. Let me serve you, madam. It's my pleasure. Miss Maid smiled. Hashtag PS. Next chapter. 3. Chapter 1652. Saliva could kill? Without a doubt, Father Stella's saliva was more powerful than a bullet. A human's fragile body could not withstand it, but Joe was not an ordinary human. He blocked it. The dense power of death turned into a wall, directly blocking it from reaching him. Joe shook his head and sighed. I don't know if I should be happy or angry. You always give me different things every time. Well, this time can't be considered a surprise. The priest widened his eyes and looked at him suspiciously. He said in shock, I thought I was enigmatic enough. I didn't expect you to be even more ridiculous than me. Even I almost couldn't withstand it. Well, it seems that I have met my match today. Father Stella reached out and pulled out a rolling pin with flour on it from his priest robe. He raised it up. Old rolling pin. Served the church for more than 30 years. It has the smell of an old granny. Everyone who used it said it was good. Joe shook his head and flicked his finger. His shadow instantly expanded into a huge black circle. The area covered by the black circle seemed to have turned into a black pool. Something instantly emerged from the circle. Surprisingly, they were two gigantic, three-headed hounds with black bodies. The moment they appeared, they directly pounced on Father Stella. At this moment, Joe looked at Teacher Poulin and suddenly said, If you and this priest were to attack me together, you might be able to stop what I'm about to do. But in reality, you've never succeeded. Teacher Poulin frowned. What the hell was this inexplicable future completion time? Teacher Poulin waved his hand. Obviously, he still wanted to see it for the time being and retreated to the side. Then, it's about time. Joe sighed, but at this time, the two three-headed black hounds had been pressed to the ground by Father Strahl and rubbed against them. Joe probably didn't think that two black three-headed hounds would be able to do anything to Father Straw. At this moment, he opened his hand, and a huge black scythe floated out of the black circle. A strange light flashed in Joe's eyes as he charged forward. The moment the scythe and the rolling pin collided with each other, a huge shockwave spread out. Joe and Father Stella instantly turned into two lightning-fast figures, using the entire town as a battlefield. On the other side, the Black Cat was also facing off against Tom Cruise. Wasco found that he did not seem to have any leeway to intervene. It was because the two cats were too small and the angle was too tricky. He could only be anxious. Could it be that, like what Stella said, he was willing to become a background character? How hateful. I think you should go help Pluto, Mylata suddenly said in a low voice. Thanks to standing beside Teacher Pullen, Mylata wasn't attacked by the surrounding death energy. At this moment, however, Professor Poulin suddenly looked at Mylata. Mylata hastily said, I'm talking about Joe. You see, you all have the same power, so you should agree to the formation. What's wrong with you? What happened to me? Teacher Poulin asked in surprise. Your eyes. Mylata's face was full of fear, and your gloves? Teacher Poulin subconsciously lowered his head to look, only to see that the white gloves on his hands were actually burning at this moment. Teacher Poulin abruptly raised his head, his eyes still completely turning into a pure black color. The fifth time, why is it like this? Go quickly leave. What? Mylata was stunned. Elder Poulin didn't explain, and an anxious expression flashed past his face. Soon after, he extended his hand and directly pushed Mylata away. At this moment, a grayish-black ball of light directly wrapped around Mylata. After being pushed away, he instantly rushed to the edge of the small town because of this grayish-black ball of light. At this moment, Teacher Poulin's gloves were completely burned. In the next moment, Teacher Poulin bent his body. His hands turned into darkness, and a thick black gas spurted out from his back, like a pair of ugly black wings. He suddenly roared toward the sky and spat out an even thicker black gas. At this moment, with Teacher Poulin's body as the center, a large amount of black gas spurted out and filled the whole town square, turning into a huge black ball, swallowing everything. And this huge black sphere was actually continuing to expand. Good. I didn't expect this 30-year-old rolling pin to be broken. Father Stella stared blankly at the broken rolling pin in his hand, showing a pained expression. As for his priest's black robe, it had been cut in many places, but it was only damaged. His body was obviously not injured. Joe was standing on the roof of a house, looking at Father Stella across the street. He said sincerely, Father, you are really the darling of this era. In my impression, there is also a powerful human like you. He is called Musha. Never heard of him. I don't know him. I actually don't know him. He must be a minor character with no fame. Father Stella threw away the half of the rolling pin in his hand, and then took out another rolling pin from the priest's black robe. He said seriously, it seems that I have to show my real skills, a 40-year-old rolling pin. Joe obviously didn't want to care about the difference between this 40-year-old rolling pin and the 30-year-old rolling pin. He sighed and slashed the long street with his sickle. In an instant, a huge wall of death power rose into the sky in the middle of the street, separating him from Father Straw. Joe flew up and said softly through the wall of death, This is the only way, Father. Maybe you don't know, I have fought with you countless times, but there has never been a result. In the future, there won't be. It's a pity. Want to leave? Father Stella glared. You offended me, and you still want to leave? Naive. Holding the 40-year-old rolling pin, Father Stella directly smashed the wall of death. But at this moment, a dangerous signal rose in Father Stella's heart. He stopped his hand movement and saw the town was being swallowed by a huge black ball. It has begun. Joe put away his sickle, looked down at the small box in his hand, and then flew up, leaving a sentence for Father Stella. Father, see you next time. Town, clock tower. The expanding black ball had already swallowed the clock tower. In the black ball, the place that was swallowed didn't change. The only difference was that the concept of life was not allowed here. Everything that was alive passed away within this sphere. Boss Luo and Miss Servant Girl still stayed on the clock tower calmly. This is Pluto, the ultimate weapon that destroyed the ancient Greek kingdom of God. Miss Servant Girl looked at the strange change of Teacher Poulin on the square in surprise. I didn't expect it to be him. Miss Servant Girl didn't know everything. She didn't really serve the shop for a long time, and most of her knowledge originated from her identity before she served the shop. Of course, due to the particularity of the dimensional crevice and the parallel development of countless subworlds, Miss Servant Girl's knowledge storage had reached an incredible level. But there were some things that she had never experienced. For example, the destruction of the ancient Greek kingdom of God. At that time, she hadn't started to serve the shop. I just understood one thing, Boss Luo said in a low voice. Miss Servant Girl looked at him in confusion. Boss Luo said, Suppose there's a customer who wants to change the past, and he can pay the corresponding remuneration. Do you think we can do it? Can we do it? Miss Servant Girl gave the answer almost without hesitation. Yes. The shop could do it, as long as the price was enough. The shop was really omnipotent. Then here is the problem. Boss Luo said slowly, if the past is changed by us, then what should we do to the people in the past? What should we do to the people who have developed to the present after the past has been changed? Miss Servant Girl stroked the hair in front of her chest with her fingers, thinking and saying, even we should make corresponding changes. But in theory, if we want to change the past customer, what he can change will hardly affect the shop. So, unless the customer can pay an unimaginable price, the shop and us can make some obvious changes. No, Luochio shook his head. Any price is not enough to change the shop in any era. How can it be? Miss Servant Girl was startled, frowning slightly. If the past could be changed, but the shop's activities along the river of time would not be affected, it was equivalent to denying the shop's omnipotence. This was a point of view that could almost break the shop's perfect ability. Why not? Boss Luo looked at Yu Yi now. His eyes were like chaotic stars, saying softly, because our time is completely independent. Miss Maid opened her mouth subconsciously. With her talent, she understood the meaning of Boss Luo's words almost at the same time. The shop's time was completely independent. It was independent of all the subworlds, even the cracks of the dimensions. Therefore, no matter how the subworld's time was disturbed, it had no effect on the shop in another timeline. Otherwise, after becoming the shop owner would not be the only independent existence in the endless subworlds. The reason why he spread his legend and searched for the primordial was so that he could be independent and unified in the endless subworlds. But if he couldn't spread his legend in the primordial, how could he unify and perfect? I should have thought of it. Miss Servant Girl lowered her head, murmuring something. Boss Luo smiled. Actually, whether it's the past or the future, I can communicate with them. This ability has no disadvantages from the beginning, but I need to understand this principle. Well, this chaos is going to be a thing of the past. Above the huge black ball, a gap suddenly split open. Within the gap, Joe's body exploded with a gray, hazy brilliance. Like a meteor, he directly crashed into Teacher Poulin in the center of the square. Boom! At the moment when the black ball swallowed the square, Wasco, Tom Cruise, and the black cat all left all the way. In fact, Tom Cruise instinctively felt that he was not afraid of the black ball, but it seemed that it would be troublesome if he stayed for too long. Plus, the black cat took the initiative to leave, so he followed all the way. He still hoped to swallow the black cat. My time is up. The black cat suddenly stopped at this moment. The moment it saw Joe break the black ball and rush into it, it had already stopped. The black cat who stopped looked at Tom Cruise, who was at a loss, and suddenly said, "Well, let's play next time. Meow." Tom Cruise tilted his head, but the black cat suddenly jumped up and opened its mouth, spitting out hundreds of huge tentacles. But the wings on the black cat's hind legs suddenly expanded, and its speed suddenly increased a lot, crashing into the black ball. In the square, Teacher Poulin stood like an empty shell, with black airflow crazily spurting out from his back. When Joe appeared like a meteor in front of him, Teacher Poulin moved. He slightly raised his head. Maybe it was just an instinct. The black airflow twined up and instantly swallowed Joe. But Joe walked out of the engulfing airflow easily. Our power is based on Hades. No one can hurt the other. Joe smiled faintly. No matter how the airflow crazily attacked him, it didn't affect him at all. He came to the front of Teacher Poulin and reached out his hand to press against Teacher Poulin's heart. Once, the world must have been divided into two parallel lines somewhere. But only I must have obtained the power of Yama, right? Joe said softly. Actually, we belong to this era, us, me, or you. But since this thing is in my hands, it is obvious that I should not leave it here. Joe lowered his head to look at the box in his hand. Speaking of which, it was my adoptive father who transformed you into this. We are the ones who have wronged you. Let's leave you here as compensation. Shaking his head, Joe said faintly, It's a bit boring to say this every time. I won't say anything this time. He reached out his hand and directly pierced Teacher Poulin's chest with his palm. I'll take away the status of Yama. Joe took a last glance at Teacher Poulin and then revealed a smile. Take good care of your brother or sister. Goodbye, the other me. Joe closed his eyes and gently pressed the button in the box. At this moment, a small black shadow shot toward Joe and slammed into his arms. In an instant, Joe disappeared. At this moment, the black sphere vanished like smoke in thin air. Teacher Poulin suddenly lost his support and fell to the ground. When he woke up, his eyes couldn't help but reveal a trace of blankness. He looked around blankly. Something seemed to have happened here. He knew that it must have been because of the explosion of his terrifying power of death. Teacher Poulin knew that every time his power of death erupted, it would bring about a terrible disaster. So, he chose to leave this town because the fifth explosion was coming, but he was unable to estimate the time. He only knew that it would happen soon, but he didn't know that it would happen tonight. Yama, Yama, Yama. A figure quickly ran over, gasping for breath. It was Mayor Lada, whom he had forcibly sent away before the fifth explosion. Mayor Lada angrily ran to Teacher Poulin's side. Where is Yama? Just now, what happened? Teacher Poulin didn't say anything, and only lowered his head to look at his hands. Mayor Lada was able to come here safely because the death energy that filled the town had disappeared. Not only that, the power of death that he was born with had also disappeared. It was as if something had stripped away the power of death from his body. Suddenly, a beam of light shot up to the sky again. It was a beam of light formed by a large number of light clusters. The beam of light shot up to the sky, and then the night sky was dyed bright, and a golden drizzle began to fall. In the small town, those residents who had already fallen and lost their lives, at this time, their cold bodies gradually began to warm up. They either stood up, walked out of their houses, or woke up from their sleep. They came back to life one after another. Teacher Poulin obviously didn't have this kind of ability. When the fifth explosion occurred, he would only kill the residents of the town. The reason they were able to escape this calamity was purely because they had already died before the fifth eruption of his ability. First die, then live. Could it be? Teacher Poulin seemed to have thought of something and lowered his head in silence. Far away on the beach, the Black Order Legion couldn't get this grand resurrection. Only 3 people looked at the Black Order Legion that had been completely wiped out in despair. They were Katarina and 2 other combat nuns who had temporarily left the team to search for Sister Grant's body. Katarina's old face almost collapsed, and she fell to the ground. The order is finished. Father Stella walked back with his 40-year-old rolling pin in dissatisfaction, and he met with Wasco at the fork in the square. Don't ask me what happened. How the hell would I know? The priest was angry, and he ran back to the church with Tom Cruise in one hand. But on the way, the priest picked up a wallet, and he immediately beamed with joy. Seeing the residents of the town come back to life, Wasco, who was thinking about the few Holy Night candidates in the apartment, didn't have time to quarrel with Father Stella, and hurriedly ran to the apartment building. Paladin Wasco finally saw the 4 young Paladin trainees at the entrance of the apartment building. He couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Teacher Poulin left the square and walked toward the hospital. He didn't know why, but he just felt that way, and so he walked just like that. My Lotta followed them all the way, chattering incessantly as he questioned Teacher Poulin. In the end, Teacher Poulin flipped open the dark Bible in his hand and nailed my Lotta to the wall by the side of the road in a flash. The power of death was gone, but the dark Bible was still there. This thing wasn't something he was born with. It was given to him by the priest who adopted him. His adoptive father was a kind priest, and this was probably the reason why he could be friends with Father Stella. Hospital. Teacher Poulin came to this place. In the past disaster, the hospital didn't carry out any life-threatening operations, but at this time, it was still a little chaotic. As Teacher Poulin walked over, she ran into Mr. Smith, whose face was filled with anxiety, in the corridor. And the place where Mr. Smith was, it was shockingly the operating room. Your wife. Teacher Poulin furrowed his brows. After losing the power of death, he seemed to have some kind of relief, and didn't feel afraid because of it. But without the power of death, he seemed to be unable to help Mr. Smith's family stabilize their already withered bodies. But the strange thing was, Mr. Smith's body didn't seem to have any signs of decay. Was it because of the golden rain? Mr. Smith had obviously come back to life. He had truly come back to life. Deborah is going to give birth, Mr. Smith said with his eyes wide open. Just now, she suddenly woke up, and then her stomach hurt. The doctor said, she is going to give birth. She will be fine, don't worry. Teacher Poulin comforted him softly. Although he didn't know why Teacher Poulin was here, Mr. Smith had an indescribable peace of mind at this time. The two stood in front of the operating room and waited quietly. Time passed little by little. Dawn came. The red light in front of the operating room was extinguished, and the doctor and nurse walked out with a sigh of relief. Seeing Mr. Smith anxiously waiting, they smiled and said, It's a boy. Both the mother and child are safe. Don't worry. Mr. Smith instantly felt that the great pain of the past few days was washed away by this moment of joy. The old man was stunned on the spot, but he hugged the doctor and cried happily. Unfortunately, Joe didn't find her. Mr. Smith hugged the doctor and wiped his tears, but he saw that Teacher Poulin was already far away. He shook his head, looked at the doctor, and asked, Can I go and see my wife? Of course. Teacher Poulin walked out of the hospital. The sun shone in front of the hospital, and the unprecedented feeling of relaxation made him reveal a trace of smile. He looked at his hands that didn't need to wear gloves again, and subconsciously walked to the flower trough on the side of the road. He reached out to touch, and touched a butterfly that was resting on the flower. But the butterfly was startled, immediately flew out of the flower, fluttered, and finally fell on a finger. Teacher Poulin was stunned, looking at the owner of the finger. Student Luo. Teacher Poulin stood up, looking at the magical student on the street who was stopped by the butterfly, and greeted him. Of course, there was also the beautiful female student who was always beside Student Luo like a pendant. As for whether Student Luo was fine, Teacher Poulin never thought about it carefully. Not to mention now, when the power of death was still there, Teacher Poulin didn't feel that he could hurt Student Luo at all. You seem to be very happy. Boss Luo smiled, probably because the power of death is far away. Teacher Poulin also smiled. Although he didn't touch the butterfly, his hand touched the flower beside him. The flower received the dew, and at this time, it was obviously very delicate and beautiful. Are you still leaving? Boss Luo suddenly asked. Teacher Poulin thought for a while and said, I will leave, but I will probably come back in the future, but I don't know if you will still be here at that time. This is for you. At this time, a black card flew from Boss Luo's hand to Teacher Poulin. Teacher Poulin reached out and caught it, looking at the front and back, and found that there were 4 golden patterns printed on the back. This thing seems to be a bit different from the last time I saw it. Teacher Poulin was startled. The patterns won't disappear. Boss Luo said slowly, it will always be 4 patterns, so you can always enjoy a 40% discount when you buy things from me. Speaking of which, I still don't know what you do. Teacher Poulin couldn't help laughing, but kept the black card. I sell things. Luaccio said softly. I sell everything. Teacher Poulin seemed to understand something, but he didn't intend to use the black card immediately. He felt that at this moment, he actually didn't need anything. I want to breathe the morning air. Teacher Poulin looked deeply at Luaccio. This is what I want to do most now, and I can do it myself. He started to jog, morning jog, disappearing at the end of the street. Miss May glanced at the butterfly that was still on Boss Luo's finger, and the butterfly instantly trembled and flew away. Then she whispered, Master, the eternal 40% discount card. He gave me a chance. Boss Luo shook his head and said, a chance to talk to the previous one. Isn't it worth it? I remember. Miss Maid suddenly lowered her head and frowned. A guy who still owes me 260,000 times of punishment. She will come back. Boss Luo smiled. Come, let's go back. I'll make breakfast. Dimensional crevice. In a space quietly floating in the chaotic space-time. In the broken palace of the Mansion of the Dead, a figure instantly fell. Then another smaller figure fell into the arms of the first figure. Joe! Prince Poulin and the Black Cat Hermes. I regret it. I should have moved one. No, 2 refrigerators back. I want to eat ice cream. The Black Cat muttered at this moment. Prince Poulin said faintly, Actually, you don't have to come back with me. Actually, you can throw away this remote control, then you don't have to come back, right? The Black Cat asked back. Then he won't have a future. Prince Poulin sighed. The Black Cat shook his head. Anyway, I don't have a future, so I might as well come back. This way, I'll keep living, even if it's just this part of history. I'm not doing this because I pity you. Prince Poulin smiled and said, Well, next time I come back, I'll bring 2 more refrigerators back. How many years do I have to wait? The Black Cat looked at him with contempt. Anyway, I'll accompany you. Prince Poulin said, I regret it. I won't come back with you next time. The Black Cat made threatening gestures. Prince Poulin smiled and walked out. Outside, it was the broken mansion of the dead. At the end of the War of the Gods, there was nothing left here. Then the broken mansion of the dead floated quietly in the depths of the dimensional crevice. Life would only appear after a long, long time. Anyway, it's so boring, Hermes. Prince Poulin turned around at this time, and like magic, he took out a box of cards from the pocket of his suit. Why don't we play around, Gwent? What's this? In front of the bed, Mrs. Deborah looked at her husband, who was a little weak. Mr. Smith brought a box over. Mr. Smith smiled and said, Do you remember Mr. Poulin? He's a teacher in the academy. He sent this over previously, saying that it's a gift to congratulate you on your recovery. It seems like he knew in advance. I have to thank him. Mrs. Deborah showed a sweet smile, reached out to take the box, and opened it. Inside the box was a red balloon. Mrs. Deborah was a little surprised as she held up the red balloon and found that there was a small note tied to the string that tied the balloon. It read, I am here to live hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. I wrote too much, so I wrote slowly. 22 of 82. Chapter 1653. Incident 1. Forum netizens who do not intend to reveal their names. Today, I confess to a female classmate that I have had a crush on for a long time. The process will not be described. Just like most interesting plots, I failed. My opponent was a high-ranking member of the class, nicknamed Title C Spirit. He was multi-talented and rich, and he drove a Ferrari with one hand. At that time, I was looking up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, trying to stop my tears from falling. But that was not a problem. I found that I could start a fire. I snapped my fingers, and my fingers started burning. Superpower, okay. It really is superpower. I swear on 18 generations of my ancestors and one household register that I really just snapped my fingers, and my fingers started to burn. But there's a crucial problem. After my fingers started burning, they could not stop. Right now, I think my fingers are moderately burned. It is still burning, but I can't feel any pain. It is still burning. What should I do? Urgent. Waiting online for an answer. Help. Incident 2. Ah Chong and Ah Jun's mother quickly call me mother. Things should not be like this. Things should not be like this. I'm a full-time housewife. For my husband, I gave up my job. For my children, I gave up on taking care of myself. For my mother-in-law, I learned how to play mahjong. These are all not a problem. But my husband actually cheated on me, and the partner was my best friend. I am in despair. I feel that my life has come to an end. I have already grown to 170 kilograms. I do not have the courage to lose weight. It is impossible to lose weight. It is impossible to lose weight in this lifetime. Fine, I plan to leave this godforsaken world. I plan to take my children and leave this godforsaken world. Scumbag man, scumbag woman, go to hell. You will spend every day in regret. I want you to remember this every time you have sex. Let it be a shadow for the rest of your lives. But why can my child fly? Really, I am holding my child and hanging in the middle of the building. I can't go up, I can't go down. My child can only watch me like this. He is only 2 years old. Should I feed him milk at this time? Why does he look so hungry? My friends who are so talented, I know you guys will definitely have a way. Smiley, 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 smiley. Incident 3. At City X Traffic Police Online race. Racing. A translucent white E86 was seen speeding on the road. It could take turns in the ditch, and now it had already shaken off the McLaren Black Warrior in front of it. The Black Samurai was still accelerating. It had not given up. The Black Samurai bumped into me. I flipped over. My leg was crushed. The Dark Samurai was still chasing, but it couldn't even see the taillights of the Ghost 86. The Black Samurai did not give up. It was not a car that was fighting. Come on. Damn it. I'm injured and you still don't care. Incident NO. Shit. My house was destroyed by a robot. It's true, the house next door was also destroyed by another robot. Many houses in our town are the same. I suspect that our world is being invaded by aliens. I feel that the robot in my house should still be operational. I'm trying to open its cockpit now. Guess if I can open the window or not. With a double click, I've added you to my account. With more than 10,000 reposts and comments, I'm going to drive a Gundam today. Hey, this live streaming robot. Is he at the place where your cheap son is studying? Sister Rin? Lizzie crossed her legs and tore open a bag of potato chips. Before this, she had already eaten 2 buckets of popcorn, 3 pieces of fried chicken wings, 2 kilograms of French fries, and 2 bottles of 0 liters of happy drink. She was half full. Before this, Lizzie had been eating melons for a whole day with the newly promoted boss of the magazine, Rin Xiling, who had reached the peak of her career. Not only were they eating melons in the office, but all the staff were also eating melons. They felt that they could spend the whole day eating melons. Rin Xiling stood up abruptly. Lizzie, take out your weapon. Let's go for an interview. Lizzie blinked and looked at the freshly opened bag of potato chips. She suddenly quivered. Sister Rin, I think you should care about your cheap son now. While she was talking, she grabbed a handful of chips and stuffed them into her mouth. Rin Xiling cleaned up the table and said quickly, I've already talked to my good son on the phone. He said that he is fine. At present, the local government of Britain has already dealt with this matter. The school is suspended. He is now staying in the dormitory, so he is safe for the time being. Don't talk nonsense. Let's go out and interview. I can't control my reporter's soul. It was hard for editor-in-chief Rin. Since she was promoted to the boss, she could only stay in the office most of the time to sign documents. Oh, Lizzie's eyes turned and suddenly said, But where are we going to interview? We are calm here, and the public security is good. Not to mention the strange things on the internet. There is not even a big, ordinary case outside. Today, there are several cases of middle school students fighting. Do you want to go? Where's the nearest strange thing to us? Recently, KL City. It takes at least 3 hours to drive there. You have to attend the meeting of the head office tomorrow, so you can't make it. Lizzie shrugged. Mamirin had to sit down helplessly and said in distress, Why don't we have any strange things here? Lizzie narrowed her eyes and showed a smile. Yes, I am in front of you, but I can't use my ability now, otherwise I will scare you to death. Continue to eat the melon. Mamirin shook her head and looked at the computer screen. Then she reached out and touched it. She said angrily, Lizzie, you bastard, you even finish my melon seeds? I will fire you. Eat the melon, eat the melon. The reason why they could eat the melon peacefully these days was that it was really peaceful here. It was so peaceful that it was like another world, so they could eat the melon peacefully. because the place where they lived was really peaceful. In the past 3 days, not only the school in the town was suspended, but even most of the shops were closed. Basically, except for the necessary departments and institutions that were still operating, it was like a special holiday. The residents of the town, even the students of the college, a few tourists who came to this seaside town from abroad for vacation received a notice from the British government. An investigation was conducted on the incident that happened 3 days ago in the town. The organization in charge of this investigation was a department that people had never heard of. They called themselves the Night Organization. I don't know what happened. I felt like I fell asleep, as if I entered a magical place. Was this an out-of-body experience? I felt like my soul was out of my body at that time. I saw my body, and then it was sucked into the night sky. It seemed to hover over the town. Then, what happened later, I don't know. When I woke up, my house had been smashed by that huge machine. The worst thing is, I didn't buy insurance. Is this considered a natural disaster? Did your government compensate me? Okay, next. Ignoring the noise of the townspeople, the investigator waved his hand and asked his subordinates to invite the man out of the room. Then the investigator leaned on the chair with a tired face, reached out and picked up the coffee cup on the table, and was about to take a sip, but soon his stomach began to surge. He had to put down the coffee cup. In the past 2 or 3 days, he had drunk too much of this stimulant drink, and his body had begun to protest. Forget it. Let's rest for a while. The investigator ordered his subordinates, who brought people in again. This is not something a human would do. In just 3 short days from the time they received the notice, to the people on duty, and then the interrogation of the town, the investigator had not closed his eyes for almost 50 hours, but the investigation of the townsfolk was probably less than half done. Of course, he was not the only investigator in charge of the investigation, but facing the entire town's residents. Thinking about the sorting work after that, it was really a hopeless workload. Mr. Gareth is here, the subordinate suddenly said at this time. The investigator rubbed his head painfully. He was directly under the Night Organization, and Mr. Gareth was naturally his immediate superior. What's he doing here? It seems to be to deal with the bodies found at the beach. Those were just generalities. To be precise, it should be a large number of bodies. Let the next one in. The investigator waved his hand. Since his immediate superior was here, although he did not ask about the progress here, he did not dare to slow down the progress. The investigator resisted the discomfort in his stomach, picked up the cup again, and drank the coffee. Then he frowned and looked at the next person to be interrogated. Claudia, female, 21 years old, student of St. Andrew's College. A part of the town seaside was turned into a military-restricted area. A large number of soldiers were stationed along the route along the coast, refusing all irrelevant people to enter. A military helicopter sent the current head of the Night Organization, Knight Gareth, to the scene. Just as he walked out of the helicopter, Mr. Gareth smelled a faint smell of corpses in the air. Mr. Gareth subconsciously took out a handkerchief and covered his nose. "Where's Dagonite?" Mr. Gareth asked the secretary beside him. "Dagonite is in front, where the bodies are placed." Mr. Gareth nodded and walked quickly. In a short while, he came to a beach with a large number of tents. The bodies of those who died mysteriously were placed in these military tents. Gareth lifted the curtain of a tent and walked in. At this time, the clown Dagonite was standing there, thinking about something. "Dagonite, yes," Mr. Clown responded casually, still looking at the body lying at his feet. Gareth frowned in confusion. "Did you find something? This person, if I'm not wrong, seems to be called Sharon," Dagonite said in a rare, serious tone, one of the high-ranking commanders of the Black Order. According to the intelligence, he was a guy who had been specially strengthened and transformed. "I've seen his body. There were no external injuries, nor was he poisoned. He just suddenly lost his life and died. This guy was found on the streets of the town. When he was found, he was still wearing something similar to the Dragon Rider armor. When I came, I received a report that the wreckage of a special submarine was found in the nearby sea. I dived down to take a look. It should have sunk in the past few days." Dagonite shook his head and said, "It should also be something of the Black Order, including these bodies." There was too much information contained in this, so Gareth couldn't draw a useful conclusion from the fog for a while. At this time, Dagonite suddenly thought of something and asked, "It's been 3 days since the incident happened. Logically speaking, you should have come as soon as possible. Why are you so late?" Gareth frowned and said, "The world has changed. It seems that after this incident happened 3 days ago, a large number of supernatural events have occurred around the world. Strange things keep happening. Although the impact of each event isn't big, when they happen all at once, the governments of various countries can't help but feel anxious. Among them, the Huaxia country in the east is the most serious. It seems to be a disaster area with the outbreak of supernatural events. In the Huaxia country, the number of supernatural events that we know of is currently more than 900. We don't know, so who knows how many exactly have happened." So, Dagonite seemed to have thought of something. Mr. Gareth said solemnly, "Her Majesty is discussing with the United Nations of the European continent. I'm afraid that a summit meeting of various countries will be held in the near future." "Oh?" Mr. Clown showed a playful smile at this time. It seems that the world that has been covered for so long is finally going to reveal another layer of its veil. Mr. Gareth glared at Dagonite. He was really dissatisfied with this guy's character of not caring about things. The chief of the night organization said with a headache at this time, "Earlier in the Fog City riot, we barely managed to ask the people of the Magician Association to help and erase the memories of most people, but the residual effects haven't been eliminated yet. There's still a lot of legends spreading among the people. This time, I'm afraid that there's really nothing we can do." Dagonite blinked and said, "So, you've already looked for the Magician Association?" "Yes. Why haven't we looked for them?" Mr. Gareth shook his head and said, "Not only us, but many forces are also looking for them. But do you know what the Magician Association's answer was?" "What?" Mr. Gareth said with a strange expression. "They said, it's none of their business. They have collectively moved to the inhuman domain. For the matters of the modern world, it's reasonable for them to help out." Ha 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 ha! Only Mr. Clown's laughter sounded in the tent. Chapter 1654. Mr. Garrett's visit this time was mainly about the Black Order's bizarre death in the town. The Black Religious Order had terrifying power in the Dark World, and they had extraordinary technology. Just look at how the former Prime Minister was able to create the Dragonite armor because of some technology from the Black Religious Order, and you could see how slim they were. To put it bluntly, Mr. Garrett's visit this time was actually to obtain the Black Order's technology. The town not only had a large number of Black Order combatants, but also a large number of ultimate soldiers. The corpses of those Black Order combatants could be studied to unearth many secrets of the Black Order. As for those ultimate soldiers, if Xiao could use them again, rather than saying that the seaside had become a cemetery for the Black Order, it was better to say that the seaside had become a transcendent treasure. "I'll stay here for a few days to sort out everything here." Mr. Gareth pulled Dagonite out of the tent. "Those huge ultimate soldiers will be distributed and transported away during this time. You have to stay here and look after these bodies. This matter can't be hidden. I suspect that there will be people secretly plotting against these Black Order remnants. It seems that the holidays are still far away." Dagonite shook his head bitterly. Mr. Gareth acted as if he didn't hear him. Transcendent events in Britain have been happening constantly during this time. The night mechanisms everywhere can't spare any time. Among the 12 nights, only you have the most free time. My life is so hard." Mr. Clown continued bitterly. "How many years have I been undercover?" Mr. Gareth acted as if he didn't hear him again. He then frowned and asked, "Where is that paladin from the Holy Church now? I remember that he seemed to have a few paladin trainees with him." Dagonite thought for a moment and said, "After the incident, Wasco seemed to have left with his people. He left in a hurry. He may know a lot about this matter, but I couldn't stop him. Stella is still there, but it's probably more difficult to pry open his mouth." Dagonite's expression suddenly became a little unnatural. "Did you look for Stella later?" Mr. Gareth asked suddenly. Dagonite shook his head and said expressionlessly, "No, I'll go see him." Mr. Gareth thought for a moment and said, you stay here and watch the scene. Don't make any more trouble. Right now, the whole world is like a barrel of gunpowder. Who knows when it will explode? Good luck, Dagonet said seriously. Scram, don't get in the way of me giving alms to these faithful female believers. Did you see the fear and hesitation on their faces? They need my comfort now. In front of the church, Mr. Gareth, who came empty-handed, was pointed at by Father Stella and spat at. Mr. Stella, please cooperate with us. Mr. Gareth had always been good-tempered. He said patiently, I believe that even the Holy Church would agree to let you cooperate with our investigation. I told you to scram. Aren't you guys annoying? One just came yesterday. Father Stella snorted. Yesterday? Mr. Gareth frowned. You mean Dagonet? He came to see you yesterday? Father Stella said disdainfully. I don't care what that guy's name is. That idiot came to show off in front of me yesterday. After I punched him a few times, he crawled away. Do you want to give it a try? With that, Father Stella blew on his fist. Let me tell you, when I hit someone with my fist, even I'm scared. Mr. Gareth really did have the thought of testing this priest. But when he thought of the fact that Dagonet had lied to him, he knew that he must have been tricked by Dagonet. With Dagonet's bad character, he probably concluded that he would be at a disadvantage if he really made a move. Father, Mr. Gareth took out a card. My phone number is on it. If you think of anything, you can call me at any time. We, the Knights, are really sincere in cooperating with you. Scram. The priest waved his hand in annoyance. He didn't know what kind of attitude the Holy Church had towards Stella. At present, the whole world and all the inhuman and transcendent were in a rather delicate state. Gareth didn't intend to act rashly. After saying goodbye, he left with his subordinates. Lotta, close the door. Father Stella crumpled the card and threw it on the ground. Today, except for the female believers, don't let anyone in, or I'll let Tom bite. Lotta. The priest casually scolded a few more times, only to realize that there was only Tom Cruise squatting by his feet. The man and the cat stared at each other for a moment. Only then did the priest slap his forehead. Lotta had disappeared for the past few days and hadn't come back at all. It's over. It looks like my free labor won't come back. The priest's heart hurt. In human domain, a ray of white light fell. My Lotta heaved a long sigh and knelt on the ground. He cupped the soil on the ground with both hands and brought it to his nose. He sniffed it hard. I'm finally back. My Lotta felt like a lifetime had passed. It was only after he tore his clothes that he managed to extricate himself from the wall. But after that, he never saw Teacher Poulin again. Pluto, Teacher Poulin, they were all gone. While my Lotta was hesitating, he found that the power of the Soth God clan that had disappeared had recovered. After regaining his power, my Lotta had an indescribable feeling. The modern world was too dangerous. He didn't even think about it and escaped from the town. He also found a private coordinate that led to the inhuman domain nearby. This was taken from a wandering magician. In short, my Lotta successfully returned to the inhuman domain. After sighing in his heart for a while, my Lotta immediately found a way back to the Soth God clan's base. He was anxious to report what happened in the modern world to the God of Darkness. He hoped that the failure of this mission wouldn't affect the God of Darkness' evaluation of him. It only took him half a day to return to the base of the Soth God clan. The clansmen looked at him and seemed to have vaguely guessed that this high-ranking member of the God clan had suffered a lot, but they didn't ask too much. What happened? Why did the clansmen look so depressed? My Lotta couldn't help but ask. A clansman came forward and sighed. The Magician Association has been cracking down recently. Our clansmen scattered in various regions have been caught. During this time, hundreds of our clansmen have been caught by the Magician Association. I think it's because we attacked the Magician Association a few times before when we were looking for clues about Pluto. Oh, right. Did you come back because of the mission from the God of Darkness? I'm going to meet the God of Darkness now. My Lotta didn't say much. If he said anything, he would lose face. At that time, no one in the clan would give him face anymore. When he was popular, all he had to do was say, "Give me face," and the clansmen would give him face. Face could solve a lot of problems. Thinking about this, my Lotta hurriedly entered the cave where the God of Darkness was. Normal clansmen weren't allowed to enter and disturb the god of darkness's sleep. Only the selected high-ranking members of the Soth God clan could receive the honor of directly facing the god of darkness. Holding a torch, Malada walked forward and finally stopped in front of a large black stone wall. The cave was dark. Malada lightly sighed and crossed his hands in front of his chest. He then knelt on the ground and deeply bowed, almost touching the ground with his head. Great God of Darkness, your most loyal follower, Malada, has returned. I brought back some news regarding the Underworld King. The black stone wall in the depths of the cave suddenly lit up. It seemed like there was a hazy shadow in the stone wall. It was very small. Then, the shadow suddenly expanded, filling the entire stone wall with light. Malada heard a call that seemed to come from the depths of the soul. It was low and cold, and there seemed to be a trace of anxiousness. What news? Malada didn't dare to hide anything. He started from when he brought his clansmen into the modern world, all the way until he was temporarily stripped of his power by a powerful old human mage. Only then did he pause. But just as he was about to continue, he couldn't help but hear the furious voice of the god of darkness explode in his ears. Trash! You're trash! Malada was immediately covered in cold sweat. His forehead was completely pressed to the ground as he said with a trembling voice, Great God of Darkness, please give me a chance to explain this experience before punishing me. I really did see the legendary Underworld King, and there seems to be more than one Underworld King. What? The shadow in the stone wall made a sound of surprise at this moment. Then it said, All right, I'll give you the right to continue speaking. Malada, remember, you can't hide anything. It's like this. After I lost my power, by chance, I temporarily took shelter in a church. Malada carefully said, There was a crazy priest in the church called Stella. His power was unreasonably strong. I once saw him easily beat down an angel from the Holy Church. What did you say? Say it again. Say, who did you meet? That priest? What was his name? Say it again. Malada couldn't help but stop speaking. He looked at the stone wall in shock. Just now, the voice of the god of darkness suddenly became excited for some reason. It was unprecedentedly excited. Say it again. Malada's mind was greatly shaken. He could only hurriedly say, Father Stella. Stella? Stella? The shadow in the stone wall crazily shook at this moment. It's really Stella? Then could it be that I've already? Me? God. Malada looked at the excited divine Lord of Darkness in astonishment. His face then revealed a mixture of fear and ecstasy. The stone wall has cracked open. The god of darkness is finally going to break the seal. Is the glory of Soth God clan finally going to be restored? Ecstasy filled his heart. At this moment, Malada was so excited that he even stood up. He clearly saw a crack appear on the stone wall at this moment. This crack appeared suddenly, and this crack even continued to extend. Crack, crack, crack. Finally, the entire huge stone wall was filled with cracks. Finally, Malada heard the sigh of the god of darkness from the depths of the stone wall. Then, a terrifying power leaked out from the crack in the stone wall. In just a breath's time, Malada was knocked unconscious by the powerful force that leaked out of his body. Boom dash! The stone wall finally couldn't withstand the pressure from the inside and exploded. The depths of the cave shook crazily. A figure slowly walked out from the falling rocks and dust. I'm out. It looked down at its hands. I'm finally out. The excited voice resonated in the depths of the cave. It was so excited that it let out wild laughter. Congratulations, Miss Lamias. Amidst its wild laughter, a voice that seemed to mean tranquility slowly came. It startled the god of darkness who had just walked out of the stone wall. A trace of doubt flashed in its eyes. In the next moment, the doubt in its eyes disappeared and was replaced by anger and resentment. It didn't speak. Instead, it followed the direction of the voice and punched without saying anything. I've been wanting to give you this punch day and night. I don't know how long I was trapped in the stone wall. I could only cultivate my fighting will. So, I'll return this punch to you. It's you who made me suffer this long imprisonment. The power of fighting will was contained in the fist. The power was so strong that the falling rocks in the cave were crushed into powder. Finally, boom dash! His fist solidly struck something, and a tremendous explosive sound rang out. Chi waves instantly scraped away the inside of the cave. At the entrance of the cave, there was a strong airflow that blew towards the several ancient trees outside. Okay, I'll take your punch, and I won't resist. It kept silent and silently withdrew its fist. The punch just now didn't hit the opponent at all. Instead, it was blocked by an invisible wall on the surface of the opponent's body. After a long time, it raised its head and said in a low voice, "I feel like I've gone crazy. I prepared a gift for you, Miss Lamius." "Someone," Boss Luo said softly. Then, he waved his hand, and something fell from the air. It was a bloated and ugly man. Master Pride from another world. So, it looked at Master Pride, who was motionless on the ground like a pile of mud. Suddenly, 2 lines of tears flowed down. "I really returned to the original era. To be exact, you've lived to this era." Boss Luo smiled and said, "Congratulations, Miss Lamius. You've already obtained the ultimate power of humans in this world." But it couldn't feel happy. This power was accumulated bit by bit in the long and dark imprisonment. It was earned through hard work. Chapter 1655. Lamia's spirit was still a little unstable, and her heart was like an active volcano. "Look at me," Luaccio whispered. Lamia's subconsciously looked at Luaccio's eyes, and in the next moment, she seemed to have walked into a small pavilion in the middle of a quiet lake. She heard the sound of the wind, the swaying of the leaves, the sound of her own heartbeat, and the sound of time. Then she walked out of the unreal world, and her spirit and body gradually merged. Her anger disappeared, and the sense of dislocation brought about by that long time seemed to be just a short movie, and she was like an audience member who accidentally fell asleep in this short movie. "Time really flies," she slowly sighed, and her eyes were clear. The battle of the gods seemed to have happened yesterday. The violent fighting spirit in her body also became gentle at this time, and the total amount did not change, but seemed to have been purified. She had become even more powerful, but she was still within a certain limit. It was just that there was an additional possibility. "Is this an additional service fee?" Lamias said coldly after silence. Luaccio smiled and did not say anything. Lamias shook her head, and she was analyzing the gains and losses. There was no doubt that being sealed in the crystal was a very painful and desperate thing, and this pain lasted for a long time, and it had made her collapse several times, and then she woke up from the collapse. Sometimes she did not know who she was and forgot who she was. She was locked in the darkness, and there was no sound. The disadvantage was obviously the pain. She was sure that she would never want to endure the pain again. There were also advantages. Her will was tempered, and the fighting spirit that was cultivated for a long time, even if the quality was not high, but the huge amount could be said to be a miraculous number, and even seemed to have a life transition, and she was no longer an ordinary human. There was no doubt that she got power. She did not need to rely on external things, and it was purely her own power. But intuitively, this power compared to the Greek gods, especially the goddess Athena, the god of the underworld Hades' divine power, was still like the difference between a zero pay-to-win player and a rich dad. Even compared to Musha, there was a big difference. Otherwise, she would have broken the crystal wall long ago and would not be trapped until now. Therefore, it was obvious that Boss Luo was the one who broke the crystal wall. Lamias shook her head with a bitter smile. "I've been trapped here. Even I don't know how long I've been trapped here. I still can't find a way to break this stone wall. The only thing I can think of is to find the person you're talking about." Shaking her head, Lamias couldn't help but sigh. "I didn't expect that when I met this group of people who call themselves Soth God Clan, I was actually so close to my original era. Now, how much time has passed?" Luaccio said, "It's been 4 days since you left." "It's only been less than 4 days." Lamias opened her mouth. The feeling of dislocation suddenly became obvious again, but it didn't make her feel confused anymore. She was silent for a moment and finally sighed. I asked the guy from Soth God Clan to look for Hell King. The person you wanted me to look for was Hell King, right? Unfortunately, when I finally found him, I was already trapped in the stone wall. I could only watch as he disappeared. Shaking her head, Lamia's looked sad. All these years, I couldn't find a way to leave this place. There was no news of Hell King either. But a while ago, that feeling appeared again and woke me up. In fact, if that feeling didn't appear again, I'd still be crazy. Boss Luo didn't say anything. He just casually glanced at Master Pride, who was lying on the ground like a pile of mud. Lamia said indifferently, "What's wrong with him? Do whatever you want with him." Luochio said casually. 10 minutes. Lamia said suddenly, "I'll wait for you outside." Boss Luo smiled and turned to walk out. Lamia's looked at Master Pride, who was motionless like an empty shell and whose eyes were lifeless. She slowly walked towards him. "All of this is because of you. Isn't this karma?" 10 minutes wasn't a long time. For Boss Luo, who was used to letting himself go, it was especially short. Lamia's walked out from inside, as if nothing had happened. "Are you feeling better?" Luochio asked. "His spirit is trapped." Lamia's glanced at Boss Luo and said indifferently, "I'm a little unhappy that I can't hear his screams and pleas for mercy. But it's good to be a punching bag for a long time." Boss Luo obviously didn't plan to take back Master Pride. He never took back the things he gave out. "Tell me about your experience." Boss Luo thought for a while and asked. He wanted to save as much as he could. He had just used up most of his time. Now, he had more or less made up for it. However, his stingy nature hadn't been worn away by the altar. He was still very strong. The War of the Gods broke out. Lamias recalled and said, "I don't know much. I was trapped here and couldn't get out. What I know is limited. I only know that the underworld king Hades created a terrifying weapon of death. Then, the gods fell one after another. The sky fell and the earth cracked. Then, the dimension shattered. A strange monster started to invade from outside the shattered dimension. The gods, humans, and demons of the age of the gods almost all died. Then, everything returned to peace. It seems that only the Lord of the Sky left." "Oh," Luochio blinked. After his conversation with the previous owner ended, he left. He didn't personally experience what happened after that. Of course, he could investigate. However, although what Lamia said was simple, it was basically the complete direction of the story. Or maybe they escaped. But whether they escaped or not, I really don't know. Mount Pantheon, the human realm, and the underworld, how shattered are they? Lamias shook her head. There are many things that I can only judge based on what I hear. I have to thank those gods. When they were fighting, they liked to make a big fuss and let the whole world be filled with their voices." "I see." Boss Luo nodded. Then, he didn't say anything. Lamias didn't know what he was thinking. Even now, she was still afraid of this mysterious Manor Master. Especially now. In the past, when she was just an ordinary person, or at most a strong ordinary person, she couldn't judge. But now it was different. She felt that she could take on several Black Order. All of them. However, the more powerful one was, the more one feared the Manor Master. What else do I need to do now?" Lamias couldn't stand the silence and couldn't help but ask. She was a little scared. She was afraid that this Manor Master would throw her into another dimension. If she had to be imprisoned for a long time again, she would rather destroy herself. "You don't need to do anything." Boss Luo shook his head. "Or rather, you can do whatever you like now. The agreement between us is over. From now on, the future belongs to you." "Me?" Lamias looked at him in disbelief. She felt that it was quite strange that he let her go so easily. "You're free." Luochio smiled. Then he opened a passage to the present world and walked in. "If you're interested, you can also come to my manor as a guest. Then, I'll have to trouble you, Miss Lamias." He left just like that. Lamias's pupil shrank. "So, what exactly am I now?" Lamias looked at the scenery that she saw for the first time since she was free. She suddenly didn't know what she needed to do. When she was imprisoned, she only had one thought, and that was to get out and gain freedom. Even if she couldn't go back to the past, at least she wouldn't be imprisoned. But now, she was back. She had power. Master Pride was now a punching bag that she could easily bully. But she didn't know what she should do in the future. Go back to the Black Order? She had already rebelled against the Black Order. Both sides were enemies. Perhaps she should go find trouble with the Black Order? But she just had this thought, and she wasn't interested in it at all. After experiencing the Age of the Gods and seeing the real power that could destroy heaven and earth, she didn't think much of the Black Order. The passage was right in front of Lamia's. It didn't disappear. She knew that Luaccio had left it for her. It was like a choice. Lamia's pondered for a moment. Then, she turned around and went back into the cave. She glanced at Mayor Lotta, who had fainted because of the explosion of her fighting spirit, and suddenly shook her head. She had purposely communicated with the Soth God clan in order to find Pluto. She wasn't a god from the Age of the Gods. Now that she was free, it was none of her business if the God clan wanted to restore the glory of the Age of the Gods. After thinking for a while, she decided to leave this place. She picked up Master Pride, who was like a pile of mud. Lamia's didn't leave anything behind. She walked directly into the passage that Luaccio had left behind. God Lord. When Mayor Lotta woke up, he saw that the stone wall had been broken and the God of Darkness had disappeared. He only felt that he had been abandoned. He sat in the cave in a daze. Later, when the people in the clan saw that the strange movement in the cave had calmed down for a long time, they gathered their courage and formed a team to look for Mayor Lotta. They saw that Mayor Lotta, who seemed to have lost his mind, was laughing and crying at the same time. At this moment, a low voice sounded in the sky of the secret place. We are the law enforcement team of the Magician Association. We declare that all members of the Soth God clan put down your weapons and surrender. Also, hand over the murderer of the previous attack. Outside the secret place, there was a whole team of the Magician Association that was ready to go. There were a total of 200 magicians. On this day, in the nest of the Soth God clan, a group of people died in the battle. Some escaped in the chaos, but most of them were directly captured and sent back to the headquarters of the Magician Association. This time, the Magician Association seemed to be determined to deal with the historical problems in the inhuman realm, and their methods changed from gentle to forceful. At sunset, the law enforcement team of the Magician Association began to escort the captured members of the Soth God clan away. There were about 100 of them, and most of them were old, weak women and children. Name. A leader of the law enforcement team came to Mayor Lotta. He felt that this bald man seemed to have a special status in the Soth God clan, since those escaped members of the Soth God clan had to protect him several times. Mayor Lotta seemed to have heard it. His lips moved slightly, but no one knew what he was saying. The leader of the law enforcement team approached and listened. He heard Mayor Lotta say in a dreamy voice, "I must be not pious enough. I must be not pious enough. God Lord." Mayor Lotta suddenly rushed out, but he was soon pressed to the ground by the magicians of the law enforcement team. He didn't seem to know that. He looked up at the sky and shouted, "God Lord." Huh? The leader of the law enforcement team was surprised. He looked at Mayor Lotta with a strange expression and didn't say anything. "Sir, what's wrong?" the subordinate asked. The commander frowned and thought for a moment before saying, "No, this guy's appearance reminds me of those fanatics and ascetics of the Holy Church. He doesn't know who he is offering his faith to." "Faith?" The subordinate was startled. The leader shook his head and said, "Don't think about it. We can't see that kind of thing. We are magicians, academics who pursue the truth. We don't play with theology. Go back. The Tower Masters are discussing how to deal with the modern world. There seems to be a result." "What's the result?" the leader said with a strange expression. It seems to be planning to build the first magician academy in a modern world." "Is it Hogwarts?" the subordinate exclaimed. The leader slapped the subordinate's head and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? It's just a plan. We haven't even thought of a name yet." The law enforcers of the Magician Association left before the sun set. Time zone, January 11th. On a certain street in Japan, a fierce-looking young man was sitting in a ramen restaurant and eating a large bowl of barbecued pork ramen. The owner of the ramen restaurant was chatting with the customer in front of the table. It was about what happened in the past few days. It's true. I can guarantee that what I saw was the legendary earthbound spirit. You know, it was because of the murder that happened in that house that the price was extremely low that I had the money to buy it. So you think that the white figure you saw last night was the wife of the previous owner who was murdered? What else? Someone told me this morning that they saw her dead husband. At that time, she was in bed with the plumber who came to fix the water pipes. Oh, boss, tell me the process in detail. Hearing this, the fierce-looking young man became impatient. He slammed the table and said loudly, "Boss, where are my dumplings? Do you not want to do business anymore? I'll tear down your restaurant." Right away, the owner of the ramen restaurant was startled. The customers who were chatting also lowered their heads and focused on eating their noodles. They didn't dare to look around. The young man sitting next to them gave off a feeling that he was looking for trouble all the time. At first glance, they could tell that he was a professional gangster. Boring. The fierce-looking young man shook his head and then looked at the side. There was a 10-year-old kid sitting next to him. However, the kid had no expression on his face and was looking at a flyer attentively. "Kid, what are you looking at?" The young man frowned. "Hurry up and finish eating. We have to collect the debt later. This time, you will collect the debt by yourself. You can finish your apprenticeship now." The kid didn't care about the fierce-looking young man at all. He just opened the flyer in front of the young man and showed a yearning expression. "What is this?" The young man frowned and found that it was a flyer for a signing event. 30th Anniversary Commemorative Painting Collection. Sanctuary. Teacher Cheta wants to meet you. You want to go to this signing event? The kid nodded vigorously. He was still expressionless. "I'm not going." The young man waved his hand and took the flyer. He crumpled it into a ball and threw it away. The kid silently lowered his head and didn't say a word. The young man frowned and moved his lips. In the end, he snorted and said irritably, "Half an hour at most." The kid picked up his chopsticks and ate quickly. The young man shook his head. 3 months had passed in the blink of an eye. It was time for him to go back and report. The new owner. The young man scratched his head in annoyance. It seemed that this was a very troublesome matter. He wasn't good at this kind of polite thing. But at this time, the kid pulled the corner of his clothes. The young man opened his mouth and saw that the kid had already finished the large bowl of ramen in front of him. "TSK, I don't see you being so quick when collecting debts. Boss, the bill. Go. I can't accompany you for much longer, kid." He thought to himself, ############################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################### Around o'clock. PS2. The original Glory competition is at the Discovery event. Remember, I'm in the Guangdong division. Please you can click on it every day. Is identical to Omega is identical to. Chapter 1656. The signing event was held in the lobby of a hotel. It was just past lunchtime, and the event hadn't officially started yet, but the lobby was already crowded with people. All of them were fans of Sensei Cha Tian. This comic had been published for more than 30 years and had once become a global hit. The reporters were interviewing the fans who had been waiting for a long time. Natsuya Suzuki and the child pushed left and right, and after scaring a few elderly women, they successfully came to a corner of the lobby. Natsuya Suzuki looked at the comic in the child's hands and shook his head disdainfully. He had been trying to explain to the child all the way, using all kinds of methods, dancing with joy, and almost running out of words. This thing is not fun to watch. The fighters inside are so weak that I can fight a whole group of them without taking a break. It's just that the Pantheon is a little troublesome. The child stared at her suspiciously. Suzuki had no choice but to stammer. After a while, she told her the gist of it. Perhaps there were a few difficult ones. Kid, get the autograph and leave immediately. But there was a cue. Natsuya Suzuki couldn't do anything evil here, so he could only impatiently line up behind a fat, middle-aged man in a white short-sleeved shirt. He glared at the man in front of him, and the man was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat and automatically gave up his position. Natsuya Suzuki was delighted. He felt that he could stare all the way and be the first to get the autograph. So he really used some tricks and stood at the front of the line. The child gradually showed a look of expectation. What? It starts at 3 o'clock. Natsuya Suzuki looked at the time. It was only 7 minutes past 1 o'clock. He turned around and looked at the crowded scene. Suddenly, he felt extremely regretful and wondered if he should tear down the hotel lobby. But he was only responsible for collecting debts in the store, and he didn't belong to the system of promoting performance. So he really couldn't do it casually. But if he considered the situation of the continuous strange things in society these days, it seemed that he could do something. Natsuya Suzuki really didn't want to stand in this place for nearly 2 hours. After glancing at the child who was full of expectation, he coughed twice. "Brat, I need to go to the bathroom. Wait for me here. Don't walk too fast, do you hear me?" The child nodded silently. Natsuya Suzuki put his hands in his pockets, nodded, and walked out. In the same hotel, in a quiet and comfortable lounge on the upper floor, a young girl in a white dress was sitting in front of the piano, playing the world-famous song Adeline by the Water. The young girl had a face as pure as an angel's. Even the light seemed to soften around her. The sound of the zither soothed the people around them. On the sofa, an ordinary-looking old man with grizzled hair was quietly reading the newspaper. The newspaper was about some strange things that happened in the past few days. The old man seemed to be absorbed in reading it. Even after the girl finished playing the song, he still didn't react. "Father." The girl had already arrived in front of the man. She really looked flawless, whether it was her appearance or her bearing. "Oh, I'm thinking about something." The old man folded the newspaper and put it on the table. The girl glanced at a certain headline and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Father, do you believe in the things in the newspaper? I mean those strange things." The old man thought for a while and said, "Saori, you have to understand that the world we live in hides many secrets. So, if it doesn't happen in front of you, how can you be sure whether it's true or not? Common sense, social cognition, and science." The girl pondered for a while before giving her answer. The old man smiled faintly. "Actually, you still need to be skeptical." The girl named Saori shook her head and looked at the man in front of her. In fact, she wasn't this man's biological daughter. She was adopted by him when she was young. Even so, he had always been very good to her in these 10 years. There was no strange reason, nor was there any twisted emotions involved. He really only treated her as his own daughter. She could feel. Her senses were very sharp since she was young, as if she could see through people's hearts. "Father, I've been having strange dreams recently," Saori suddenly said. "What dreams?" The old man looked up in surprise. His gaze was calm. Saori slowly said, "Some very strange content, like the content of the manga you created. In the dream, I seem to be another person." "Who?" The old man seemed to be curious, but his gaze was still calm. "The goddess in the manga." Saori shook her head and sat down. She seemed to be tired. "There are many more. It seems to be a complete world, but it's fragmented. It seems to be different from the manga you created, but there are some similarities. I don't understand." "That's just a dream." The old man smiled. "You should know, before I adopted you, I was already creating this manga. Of course, because I love it from the bottom of my heart, I gave you the name Saori when I adopted you. But those dreams that intruded into her sleep were so real, as if they had happened before." Saori opened her mouth, but in the end, she just hid it in the bottom of her heart. Experiment, social cognition, science, all these things she learned told her that those were just dreams, strange dreams, perhaps caused by some kind of psychological pressure. "Okay, maybe you need to have a good rest." The old man suddenly said, "In the signing event, you can rest here. You don't need to accompany me." At this moment, someone knocked on the door of the lounge. It was the staff of the signing event in the hotel lobby, as well as the old man's personal assistant. They were outside the door. "Teacher Che-Tion, it's almost time. You may need to prepare for your appearance. I'll be right there." The old man stood up, tidied his clothes, and looked at his daughter with a smile. "Then, if the things in the dream are real, will you look forward to it?" The girl fell into silence, as if she was seriously thinking about this question. The old man said, "But in fact, I don't look forward to the day when the world in my manga becomes real." "What does father mean?" The doubt in the young girl's heart deepened. I'll go to the washroom. You stay here. The old man, Teacher Che-tion, said softly. He indeed went to the washroom. The staff and his assistant were waiting outside the door. Because there was still plenty of time, the two were chatting about something. It seemed to be some strange stories about this hotel. Once, a firefighter was burned to death here. After that, the hotel guests claimed to see a man in a firefighter's uniform wandering in the corridor at night. Of course, not all of them, only a small part of them, and they would soon forget about it. But it was said that someone saw it last night. No one knew if it was true or not. The assistant pretended to be serious and said these strange things happened recently. The staff member simply lit a cigarette and didn't care. But at this time, a hand suddenly reached out and extinguished the cigarette, but that the staff member had just lit. Bastard, didn't you see that smoking is prohibited here? I hate people smoking. The staff was stunned and turned his head, only to see a ferocious-looking young man. He was really ferocious, with a ferocious look in his eyes. If looks could kill, this young man's eyes would kill. The staff member instinctively shuddered. He was shocked and thought to himself, how scary. Obviously, the other party's appearance was quite handsome. Why was he so ferocious? I'm sorry. Due to the ferocious look, the staff hurriedly lowered his head and apologized. The ferocious young man snorted, still looking like he was looking for a fight. He walked to the door of the washroom, pushing the door open and walking in. Teacher Che-tion is inside. The assistant was startled, worrying that this ferocious young man would do something, but he didn't dare to come forward. The staff shook his head, pointing to the crumpled cigarette in the nearby trash can. It was the one that the ferocious-looking young man had taken away from him. Maybe he's just a bit ferocious, but he's actually a nice person, he said. The assistant thought for a while, feeling a bit worried. He gently opened the door of the washroom and looked inside. He found that the ferocious-looking young man didn't do anything. He was standing in front of the toilet, shaking twice. It seemed that he thought too much. The assistant felt ashamed and closed the door. At this time, the staff next to him suddenly became motionless. The assistant patted his shoulder doubtfully, but with just a simple pat, the staff directly fell to the ground with a pale face. The assistant couldn't help but raise his head. His pupils suddenly widened. He saw a person, a firefighter, whose face was burned black and brown, but was still burning. The assistant's lips trembled, and when he was about to scream in horror, the strange man directly passed through him. As if he was divorced, the assistant didn't make a sound and fell on the staff on the ground. The firefighter with the burning face didn't stop, but just walked deep into the corridor. In the washroom, Natsuya Suzuki shivered and began to pull up his pants with satisfaction. At this time, a well-dressed man with gray hair came out, looking at Natsuya Suzuki. Mr. Che-tion, who had just come out, wasn't surprised by Natsuya Suzuki's ferocious eyes. Suzuki, on the other hand, was surprised. She quickly fastened her pants and turned around. She stared at Che-tion sensei from head to toe, blinked, and said, "How can there be a guy like you in this broken place?" Mr. Che-tion couldn't help frowning. At this time, Natsuya Suzuki suddenly moved. He simply put his hands into the pockets of his pants, and at the same time, a substantial pressure rushed towards Mr. Che-tion like a stormy sea. The tiles and utensils in the washroom couldn't bear this pressure. Cracking. Mr. Che-tion frowned deeper. Facing the surging pressure, he gently waved his hand and pressed down, suppressing this invisible and terrifying pressure. Suzuki, on the other hand, was all smiles. She looked at Sensei and seemed to be quite happy. "Old man, is there anything you can't solve? I'll help you. Don't worry, the price is fair, cheap, and easy to use." Mr. Che-tion was stunned and couldn't help laughing. "I don't need any help. As long as you don't trouble me, you've done me a favor." But he was vigilant in his heart. He knew this ferocious young man was just probing him, far from showing his real strength. Without thinking, Suzuki Shiao waved his hand, and a white card flew towards Mr. Cheetah. "Don't worry. I've seen a lot of people like you. They also feel that they have nothing to solve, but one day they will find that there are still some things in the world that are beyond their power. This is my private number. You are welcome to call me at any time. Mr. Che Tion glanced at the card. Name, Natsu Suzuki Management. Accept all kinds of debt collection business, professional intimidation, recovering all kinds of organs, cleaning gang members of traders, professional development of special bloody projects such as painting walls, etc. Phone number, XXXXX 91-inch OK. I'll take it. Mr. Che Tion casually put the card into his clothes. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Suzuki. Natsuya Suzuki nodded with satisfaction. Although he was a professional debt collector, it was good to get some business from time to time. His vacation had been used up, and the extra performance was used on the kid. Now he was poor and urgently needed some money, so he had to work as a salesman. Who said I can only be a thug with my IQ? I can make a living for hundreds of years. I'll meet the best when I go out. Are you scared? You're welcome. Natsuya Suzuki wasn't fierce at all. Remember to call me if you need anything. All right. If you meet some guys who are stealthily circling around you, trying to lure you into buying something from them, you don't have to be polite. Just beat them up as hard as you can. Remember to look for me. Okay, I'll remember. Mr. Che Tion nodded. Old man, you're so easy to talk to. Natsuya Suzuki greeted him with a smile, then pushed open the door and walked out. He really walked out from there without any intention of stopping. He's an interesting guy, right? Mr. Che Tion thought silently. But at the same time, he was shocked by the unfathomable strength of the other party. Mr. Che Tion hadn't met someone who could give him such pressure in a long, long time. Mr. Che Tion stood in front of the mirror, silently thinking about the various ghost stories that had started to appear in the past few days. In the mirror, the old and ordinary face gradually changed. Finally, it became a handsome and gentle face. Holy domain, Mr. Che Tion whispered. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. 2380 seconds. Chapter 1657. After Natsuya Suzuki went to the washroom, he started to think about how to finish this boring signing event quickly. In other words, it would be best if it didn't start at all. As for the old man he had just met in the washroom, he quickly forgot about it. How should he put it? In his opinion, the old man was indeed of high quality, but he didn't intend to lick the old man's boots. He wasn't one of those guys who only knew how to lick the customer's boots all day long. In addition, as a professional debt collector, Natsuya Suzuki had helped the shop more than 800 times, if not 1,000 times. When the target was a weak scum, if it was a weak scum, it wouldn't be his turn to do it. He had seen so many of them that they didn't care if they came or not, but as long as they had an idea, he would be the first to know. That was probably their idea. He was really not good at soliciting business. It didn't matter if he occasionally opened a bill as an extra income, but if he really wanted to fill up his bottomless sales, the fastest way was to go back to the shop and ask the servant girl if she had any bad debts recently. Violence was always the fastest way to make money. Therefore, on the way back, this fierce-looking young man directly met the fireman who was wandering in the corridor with his face on fire. Natsuya Suzuki blinked his eyes and suddenly thought of an idea. He felt that he could do it. Natsuya Suzuki leisurely returned to the lobby of the hotel. There was still some time before the signing event started. He walked to the front of the line and stood beside Kid. Kid looked at him as if he was curious about why he was gone for so long. This is a matter of endurance, understand? Natsuya Suzuki grabbed Kid's head with his 5 fingers and said fiercely with his head lowered. Kid didn't really understand. At this moment, a series of rapid ringings suddenly came from the lobby. It was very ear-piercing, and then 2 hotel security guards hurriedly rushed into the lobby. Fire! Fire! Please evacuate immediately. Please maintain order. Everyone was shocked. Compared to the signing, their lives were definitely more important. So, under the guidance of the security guards and the on-site staff, they quickly walked out of the hotel. They were outside the street. Looking up, they saw thick smoke billowing out from the middle of the hotel. It seemed that a guest room or something like that was on fire. Ayaya! It was on fire. Looks like this signing event can't continue. Imp raised his head and looked at Natsuya Suzuki in confusion. You think I'm the one who started the fire? Natsuya Suzuki asked fiercely again. You don't believe me? Imp did not make a sound. With a wave of his hand, Natsuya Suzuki took out a picture album from his jacket and slapped it on the little ghost. The little ghost opened the picture album in surprise. This picture album is actually a signed book. Little ghost widened his eyes in disbelief. Natsuya Suzuki snorted. Do you really think I'll sign the one by one? Some had been prepared long ago. I just took one from the backstage. Okay, are you satisfied? Of course, it was not satisfactory. But Imp still held the signed picture album tighter. Then, he pulled Natsuya Suzuki's clothes and squeezed out of the crowd. In the afternoon, he still had to collect the debt. This was the first time Imp went alone to collect a debt. This time, the target was the boss of an amusement room. He had borrowed 2 million yuan from the law firm. That's right. Natsuya Suzuki smiled with satisfaction. You have a bright future. The future was a matter of the future. Fire? The young girl Saori was resting in the lounge with her eyes closed. At this time, Mr. Cheetah came back with his personal assistant and the staff member who came to call him and told her about the fire. Yes, Miss Saori. The personal assistant rubbed his head and quickly said, It seems that the signing event will be temporarily suspended. The fire escape over there has been opened. Miss Saori and Mr. Cheetah, please leave first. He and the staff member were woken up by Mr. Cheetah. However, they did not have much of an impression of why they suddenly fainted outside the bathroom door. But when they woke up, they were startled by the fire in the hotel, so they did not have time to think about the reason why they fainted. After passing through the fire escape, they quickly came to the ground. With the help of the personal assistant, Mr. Cheetah and Miss Saori quickly got into a car and left the hotel. As soon as the black MPV left, another black MPV quietly arrived at the hotel's underground parking lot. 3 men in black suits got out of the MPV. There was also a young man who looked 18 or 19 years old. He wore a white onmyoji costume and held a fan in his hand. Under the protection of 3 men in black suits, this young man in his late teens took the elevator to the hotel. Soon after, the fire truck arrived and the firefighting work began. The crowd was gradually evacuated. The fire on the streets of the capital circle did not cause much of a stir. This was because on most of the online forums, there were still many strange occurrences that had happened today. Mr. Cheetah had an expensive house in the capital circle. As soon as they returned to the house, Miss Satsi greeted them and went back to her room to change her clothes. Her personal assistant stayed behind. As for the staff member of the signing event, he stayed behind as a representative of the event to discuss the aftermath of the incident. Mr. Cheetah did not participate in the discussion. Personal assistants were used like this. He returned to his study room alone. Thinking of the personal business card that Natsuya Suzuki gave him, he shook his head, took out a book from the bookshelf, and put the business card in it. Thinking of what happened today, Mr. Cheetah pondered for a moment and sat in front of the desk. He put his hands on the desk, closed his eyes, and seemed to be thinking about something. Slowly, a book with a golden cover appeared in front of him. Then, the golden book began to open page by page. Finally, it stopped on a blank page. Mr. Cheetah opened his eyes at this time and said casually, "Record it." On the blank page, lines of text began to appear. The content was the strange things that happened in society in the past few days. In addition, as these words floated, pictures were automatically generated and attached to this page. Strangely, no matter how many words appeared, no matter how many pictures were generated, this night book could accommodate them. In the end, it became blank again. Then it fell on the desk. Only then did Mr. Che Tion take a pen and write something on a blank page. The world began to undergo some unprecedented changes. With the recovery of the spiritual veins in Kelowna, supernatural power began to emerge in society. In the future, the appearance of supernatural beings should gradually increase. Perhaps this civilization will gradually step into the realm of supernatural beings. Whether the collision of modern science and supernatural civilization will lead to the destruction of the existing civilization or promote the advancement of the existing civilization remains to be seen. The recorder of the secret society in world number 003 has finished recording. The golden book disappeared in an instant. Mr. Cheetah closed his eyes again as if he was resting. At the same time, A melodious sound of a zither came from outside the window. The performer was Ms. Sowery, who had returned to her room. At this time, Mr. Cheetah suddenly opened his eyes again and stood up. He looked out the window. It was the sky towards the west. Mr. Cheetah lowered his head and pondered for a while. "Lami, is that you?" "Small town." Lamias walked out of the passage. However, the place she arrived at was not Boss Luo's manor. Instead, it was the single dormitory arranged by her original academy. From Luacio's words, she knew that she had only left for about 4 days in this era. The dust in the room clearly proved its accuracy. Only 4 days had passed here. But for her, she couldn't even clearly calculate how much time had passed. Most of the time, she was in a deep sleep. The existence of the stone wall had solidified her body to some extent. She wouldn't age, and she wouldn't feel hungry because of a lack of nutrients. The cultivation of combat psyche was a cultivation of will. If the human body contained a universe, then it was the cultivation of the small universe in the body. She spent most of her time cultivating. Even if the progress was slow, it couldn't withstand the baptism of time. After such a long time, even a pig would have some achievements. As soon as she came back, Lamias suddenly had a whim. This feeling came from the faraway east, but she didn't know what it was exactly, and the strange feeling disappeared in a flash. Perhaps it was just an illusion. After all, coming back again, Lamias felt more unfamiliar and detached. She still didn't know what she should do. She had power, but she didn't have a goal. After being away from this era for so long, she suddenly felt that her life had become so empty. Lamias thought that it was because Luacio had helped her to sort out her chaotic mind. Logically speaking, after being trapped for so long, once a person was free, she would at least revel. She would do those things that she hadn't done for a long time and satisfy all the desires that had been bred for a long time. But she didn't. It couldn't be said that she was rational, but she was obviously too calm. Lamias rubbed the space between her eyebrows with a slight headache and sat down casually. As for Master Pride, she threw him on the floor. In fact, after ravaging Master Pride's body for 10 minutes, she was no longer interested in him. She was deep in thought. She felt that she had nothing to do. She stood up and stepped on Master Pride's foot. Master Pride still didn't respond. She felt even more bored. So, she opened the fridge and took out a bottle of Corolla. But she found that the lemons in the fridge had been used up. She thought about it and felt that going out to buy lemons was a very troublesome thing. She wanted to order takeout, but she found that she didn't have a phone. She felt even more bored. Loneliness +1. She turned on the TV, wanting to see what had happened recently. But she couldn't find a remote control. She felt very irritated. So, she stepped on Master Pride a few more times. Still, Master Pride didn't respond. She felt bored again. Loneliness +2. She sighed. She suddenly felt like crying. After experiencing such a long time, she had only spent such a long time. Other than loneliness, there was no one to accompany her. She didn't experience anything. She didn't see the changes in the world. She didn't see through the mortal world because of that. Loneliness +10086. She shouted, intending to step on Master Pride a few more times. But at that moment, someone knocked on the door of the dormitory. Lamias was startled. After thinking for a bit, she opened the door. A middle-aged man with a distressed and anxious expression was standing outside the door. When the man saw Lamias, his eyes were filled with surprise. The Dean of Discipline of the Academy, a former member of the Black Order, and a supporter. In fact, it wasn't just this Dean of Discipline. Lamias even saw someone who surprised her. An old woman, Katerina. This is Master Pride. Katerina, who had changed into plain clothes, saw the mud-like Master Pride in the dormitory. Her originally tired eyes suddenly became flustered. This guy is now my trophy. Not paying too much attention to Katerina's attitude, Lamias suddenly said with a playful tone, "What? You want to take back this pride from me?" Katerina fell silent for a moment. After a long while, she finally sighed and said, "We won't be able to take it back. The order is finished." This time, nearly 90% of the order's strength was lost here. Even Chief Charles died. After saying that, Katerina suddenly glanced at Lamius. Seeing that she didn't respond, she continued, "After confirming Charles's death, Justin gave the order to retreat. You should be lurking in the deep sea with the sapphire right now. He didn't go back to the headquarters, but it's useless even if he went back. The headquarters is currently in chaos." Lamius still didn't have much of a reaction. It was best that the Black Order was in chaos. It would save her a lot of trouble. That's why no one will bother you anymore. Katerina smiled bitterly. "I'm just a homeless person now." Lamius looked at Katerina for quite a while before revealing a smile. "Your Excellency Katerina, have you ever thought about reviving the Black Nunnery?" Katerina was startled. She had only come here to see Lamius. Now, the only people left in the town were her, the 2 combat nuns beside her, and the 6 female warriors who had followed Sister Grant to capture Lamius. These 6 female warriors had gone into hiding. They only dared to come out when the Black Order was on a large scale, but they still managed to avoid disaster. Katerina had only met up with these 6 combat nuns after the incident. At that time, they were in contact with a discipline master. A total of 9 people. These were the people who had survived the Black Order's large-scale attack. Katerina had lost contact with Captain Justin, and she still didn't know what Captain Justin's attitude was. As for the matter of reorganizing the Black Religious Order, she felt that she was powerless to do so. "What did you say?" Katerina looked at Lamius in surprise. Lamius smiled brightly at Katerina and the others in front of her. "I think I found something to do. Also, Katerina, I'm probably very powerful now." In front of Katerina and the others, she suddenly began to float up slowly. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. Before 3 o'clock in the next chapter, equals. Chapter 1658. A new day had arrived, but the town was still bleak, and people had not yet returned to their normal lives. There were British soldiers guarding all the roads leading to the town. The town had been completely sealed off. The investigation of the town's residents was still in progress. Therefore, the school had been suspended for several days. Boss Luo also stayed in the manor for several days as a new salted fish. Miss Maid certainly did not have the right to prohibit the boss from going out. She just very gently suggested to the boss that it was not recommended to go out before the time was restored to a certain extent. This kind of worry was almost groundless. It was almost to the extent of sitting at home and waiting for a meteorite to fall from the sky. Today's weather is good. Boss Luo took a book in the courtyard and planned to spend the morning like this. But this morning, there was a guest. Lamius. There was no surprise, nor was he moved. It seemed to be expected. Lamius appeared at the door of the manor in casual clothes. It was Eve, who brought her to the courtyard. Lamius politely greeted the boss and Miss Maid. She had to be polite. She couldn't see clearly before she had no power, so she could make a lot of guesses and make a lot of random comparisons. But now it was different. Although she still couldn't see clearly, she vaguely knew how ignorant her previous guesses were. The more she knew, the more doubts she had, and the more she was in awe. Lamius suddenly thought of this sentence, so she gave up the idea of testing her combat power at this time. At this time, she felt that she could test her combat power, but obviously, she needed to change her opponent. Maybe Father Stella was a good opponent. She still couldn't forget the scene when Father Stella sank the Nautilus with one punch. It seems that you have adapted to the present. Boss Luo just glanced at Lamius' state at this time. Maybe I should thank you, Lamius said indifferently. No need. Boss Luo shook his head. I said this is a deal. But for you, it seems to be more like a game. But anyway, you're here now, aren't you? Lamius naturally understood that she could not pursue the matter any further. After such a long period of imprisonment, although she didn't experience many people and things, and her wisdom in life clearly didn't grow much, she was still her original self, just that she had a long period of drowsiness. It was as if she had slept poorly, and when she woke up, she didn't feel very good. Miss Maid was looking at Lamius with great interest. Boss Luo didn't hide anything from Miss Maid. As long as it was something she could know, she would know. As for the things that she couldn't know, Boss Luo couldn't do anything for the time being. Those were things that involved the shop and were deeper than the altar. Even the previous shop owner would have to kneel before that kind of thing. Didn't you see that conversation under the reversal of time? The previous shop owner was erased in the next second. But Miss Maid still knew something about Lamia's return to the past. At that time, she was not a servant girl in the shop. Therefore, Yi was somewhat curious. The era before her. It was probably Eleanor's era. Miss Maid still remembered the knowledge that inexplicably appeared in her mind. What was the reason for this? It was quite subtle. Perhaps she should look for Miss Eleanor. Oh no, it should be Lancelot who serve Her Majesty the Queen now. Maybe she could find some time. Is it because I'm not dressed properly today that I got your attention, Miss Yi? Lamia said calmly at this time. She could feel that Miss Maid's gaze seemed to contain something, but she wasn't sure. She couldn't reach that level yet. But in fact, being able to care about this was already a world of difference from before. Of course not. Miss Maid chuckled. She didn't need to prepare anything to greet the guest. She excused herself and was about to leave. Don't bother. Lamia shook her head this time and said, I'm just here to say hello. I'll leave soon. Miss Lamia's plans to leave? Boss Luo was a little curious. Where do you plan to go? Back to where I used to be. Lamia's didn't seem to have the slightest intention of hiding. The religious order is finished. We lost almost 90% of our strength. I plan to reorganize the religious order. In the future, I will be the new chief of the religious order. Boss Luo didn't show any shock or surprise. He just nodded with an expression that said, I know. Lamia's didn't see anything in his eyes. There was no support or objection. While silently cursing him for being heartless, Lamia's said without batting an eyelid, I left some information in the drawer of my previous room. I know that you all follow the rules and probably won't go through the things in the room. I think most people wouldn't be able to do that. Luochio nodded. I'll get Eve to get it for you. Lamia shook her head. No, that's what I planned to leave for you all. Previously, I was thinking that you didn't even care about the holy relic of reversal, but were curious about new knowledge. So I planned to use this information to make a deal with you. But now, it seems that there's no need for that. Boss Luo said indifferently, power is only temporary. Only knowledge can be passed down. No matter what. Lamia said non-committally, I still plan to leave this information here. It's up to you whether you want to look at it or not. Anyway, it will appear one day. Then, I'll have to bother you today. Boss Luo suddenly called out to her and waved his hand to give her a necklace. This was the holy relic of reversal that Lamia's had on her before. Lamia's took it, lowered her head, and glanced at it. She didn't say anything and just nodded. She was rather calm when she came and was rather confident when she left, without the slightest bit of restraint and cautiousness from before. This was actually a change brought about by power. You become more confident. Boss Luo looked at Miss Maid and smiled after she left. That's what a woman should be. Miss Maid said indifferently. Boss Luo waved his hand and ordered, go and get that information. I'll see what it is. After a while, Eve took a piece of information and came to Boss Luo's side. Luochio opened it curiously. This information was handwritten by Lamias. There were only a few pages and no more. However, it did record some interesting content. It was a legend about an underwater world hidden under the deep sea. Underwater city. Boss Luo raised his eyebrows and suddenly remembered the huge sea turtle that had lived for a long time at the seaside a long time ago. He smiled and said, the ocean is really mysterious. Indeed, the ocean was quite mysterious, but that was only for Luochio before he took over the shop. Now, there was no mystery. Master wants to go to the bottom of the sea. Miss May could easily catch the master's thoughts. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, how long do you think it will take before the academy reopens normally? I'm afraid not in a short time. Miss Maid shook her head. If Master wants the academy to reopen, I can find Elizabeth. Elizabeth was naturally not the vampire girl who became the last student of the Tower of Radiance, but Her Majesty the Queen of Britain. Well, Boss Luo thought for a while and said, no, just take it as a normal holiday. But this underwater city is really attractive. I don't know if I'll see real mermaids. Miss Maid expressionlessly expressed that mermaids were actually very ugly. They were not nearly naked beauties as humans imagined. And because of their body structure, it was difficult for mermaids and mermaids to mate. Boss Luo just took it as cold knowledge and remembered it. But the trip to the bottom of the sea was confirmed. Luochio suddenly thought of something. The Xinyuan Palace had protected Kelowna for a long time. They had resisted the demons from the deep sea many times. Boss Luo even went to an underwater tomb with royal princess Su Zijuan. In recent times, there were no invasions of the deep sea demons. If that kind of thing happened, it was basically impossible to hide with the modern scientific ability. It was not known whether these demons from the deep sea still intended to invade Kelowna. This thought just flashed by. The morning was not over yet. Boss Luo did not intend to change his original plan of reading, but Miss Maid left temporarily. Since they had decided to go on a long journey, Miss Maid told them to prepare food and clothes, including swimsuits. You seem to be looking forward to it? Boss Luo shook his head and opened the book in his hand again. Grimm's Fairy Tales, which was given to him by Teacher Pullen. Lamias walked into Father Stella's church. 10 minutes later, Lamias walked out expressionlessly. She did not plan to see Father Stella again in a short time. But after Lamias left, Father Stella angrily ran out of the door and spat twice. They did not win, did not lose. They did not try their best, but the priest seemed to be more relaxed. But Wasco appeared. He left with the paladin candidate a few days ago and came back again, with a confidential handwritten order from the Pope. Stella, now I appoint you as a candidate for the Pope. Do you accept? No. Even if you find hundreds of nuns to serve me every day, I won't accept. But if it's 200 or 300, I can reluctantly consider. Aren't you afraid of being tired to death? Wasco glared at him fiercely and sighed. Go back. The Pope really can't go on. What does it have to do with me? Wasco took a deep breath and said, after you go back, you have the right to overturn the case. All the wrongful cases in the history of the Holy Church, you can overturn them, including Amon's charges. You can do it. You want me to slap your face? The priest sneered. Slap them hard. Wasco gritted his teeth and said, then what are you waiting for? Priest Stroll's eyes lit up, and he stood up in an instant. At the same time, the flesh on his body that was hanging down gradually tightened. The priest stood up and took off the wrinkled black robe on his body, only wearing a thin white undershirt, a body full of strong muscles. He even regained his youth, like a young man in his late 20s. He was quite handsome. You? Wasco was surprised and doubtful at this time. Father Stella snorted and said, you think that the virgin technique that I have practiced for decades is fake? Since I'm going back, I will let the little nun in the Holy Church scream for me every night. This skin is more like it. Trash Wasco, quickly hold a grand pool party for me. That's right. This familiar smell, it was indeed the Holy Church's #1 foul-mouthed powerhouse Stella. Wasco smiled. This was the first time he smiled in these few days. When he hurriedly brought a few paladin trainees back to the Pope, the first news he received was that 5 angels were killed, more than 2/3 of the paladin battalion were dead, and there was also a cardinal in red. How could he smile? After a while, the priest jumped onto the church, then took down the white cross on the roof of the church, carried it on his shoulder, then picked up Tom Cruise and left. Why are you still carrying this thing? Wasco frowned. Otherwise, if I put the holy relic here, I am afraid that it will be stolen. Father Stella glanced at him. You don't know, in this broken place there are many thieves. What? This is a holy relic. Wasco opened his eyes wide in disbelief. You actually put such an important thing on the roof so openly, the priest said disdainfully. You even put the holy relic out for exhibition. Those are different. Wasco screamed. They're all fake. It's not like you don't know. Are you going or not? Is my pool party still open? I could go, but... Wasco hurriedly snatched the white cross from the priest's shoulder. I will take care of this thing from now on. The priest didn't care, turned around, and walked back to the church. Since he didn't have to carry the cross, his hands were free, and he simply picked up a bag of black and white erotica, saying that it was to liven things up. Wasco sighed. He didn't know where the Pope's decision would lead the Holy Church to in the future, but there was no one in the Holy Church now. It was indeed the biggest crisis. More than two-thirds of the Paladin battalion had been lost, a Red Cardinal had fallen, and a large number of high-ranking priests had mysteriously disappeared and died. Even their bodies couldn't be found. This was still the highest secret for the time being, but he didn't know how long these things could be hidden. Wasco followed Father Stella in a mess and left the church of this small town. But he didn't know that those priests who mysteriously disappeared were actually in Tom Cruise's stomach, in the dimensional crevice. In a messy wasteland and chaotic floating belt, Tae spent a lot of effort to walk out. Looking in front, he felt that this direction should be straight ahead. Is this the trial place that Musashi mentioned? Tae looked at the distorted space in front of him and suddenly felt uneasy. He couldn't help but ponder. Taisetsu's character was good. You probably wouldn't trick him. This Master Musashi was introduced to him by Taisetsu, so this trial was quite reliable. I don't know if Master misses me. Tae suddenly became spirited, turned into a gray fog, and rushed to the distortion in front of him. Women are like clothes. Master is a person who does great things. Of course, he would rather be careful. Wait until I finish this undercover mission and return as the king. Then in the shop, I will be second only to one, and above all, no one will dare to disobey me. Ha ha ha. ############################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################### famous place in the dimensional crevice where one could find fortuitous encounters. The term fortuitous encounter was spread by those who called themselves immortals in the subworlds of myths and legends. There were similar terms such as fortuitous encounters, finding treasures, miracles, and so on. In short, it was a place where even newcomers to the dimensional crevice could enter without any barriers. It could not be said that the good treasures in the dimensional crevice were all occupied by large groups. The dimensional crevice had no boundaries, and no one could know how many treasures there were, all waiting to be explored. Land of the Void was a place that had been explored by many groups, but remained unoccupied, and one could occasionally find good things. Of course, because it was a public place, it was natural to encounter groups of 3 to 5 adventurers. Besides, while Land of the Void was a public place, it was also a dangerous and chaotic place. The rules inside were quite chaotic and often changed, and you would never know what you would step on in the next second. Perhaps one step would be safe, but in the next second, one would step into a huge crater with 10,000 times the gravity and fall painfully or directly enter a space where spells were forbidden. Mister, do you want to buy a map? Land of the Void has the most complete and newest trap-marked map, a must-have for murder, arson, and traveling. It was a communication ability similar to divine telekinesis. Such an ability was basically a standard ability for beings who could break the limits of subworlds and ascend to the dimensional crevice, and was automatically obtained after entering the crevice. It was the only gift of this place. TNZ met a person. To be precise, it was a youngster with the air of a marketplace, but clearly it was only because he was short and there were no ordinary people in this dimensional crevice. There were very few, like you Danxiang, who enter by mistake. How should I address you? Tianzi made a fist and palm salute. He had experience in the martial world, and before he was sealed into the white jade token, he had been mingling in the martial world. Alric, the blonde-haired youngster with a small braid, smiled. Mister, you look unfamiliar. Is this your first time here? How could that be? Tianzi, he shook his head. Old Taoist. I just don't go out much. Alric didn't say anything. In the dimensional crevice, many of the living beings who met each other would bid each other farewell in a hurry. Perhaps they would never meet again. Friendship between the cracks was very precious. Perhaps it meant that there was a possibility of traveling together. Therefore, Alric directly said, the map was recently drawn. It adds 5 newly developed regions. It only costs 0.01 subworld origin. Of course, you can also exchange items of similar value. I'm running a small business, and I'm in a business where I can lose my life at any time. 0.01 subworld source is really not expensive. Who the hell knows how much the origin of 0.01 subworlds is? What is it? Oh, is that so? Tianzi nodded and said calmly, Is there a mark on the map where the blood fruit grows? Blood tie fruit? Alric was a little surprised when he heard this. Out of curiosity, he asked directly, Sir, are you looking for this kind of thing? Is there a problem? Tayenzi frowned. Alric said, this blood tie fruit was indeed very popular in the past. However, after a long time of harvesting, this thing has gone extinct. If you want to find it, I'm afraid it will be very difficult. Little brother, do me a favor. Tayenzi suddenly took out a token. This was given to him by Master Musashi before he left. He said that he could take it out if he encountered any trouble, and the other party would more or less give him face. Tayenzi, who was used to doing things through the back door, was quite familiar with this matter. At this moment, he looked like an experienced person who knew there was someone behind him. Auric couldn't help but be startled when he saw the token. Tayenzi walked forward and put his hand on Taisetsu's shoulder. He lowered his voice and said, Let me tell you, I was introduced by Master Musashi. You know Master Musashi, right? The gatekeeper of the Eternal Night Palace. Did he ask you to pick the blood tie fruit? Auric suddenly asked. Tayenzi smiled and nodded. Okay, I'll give him face. Auric nodded, then took out a map and made a mark on the map. I've already marked the places where you can probably find it. Whether you can find it or not depends on your luck. Thank you, little brother. Tayenzi nodded with satisfaction. Of course, he was satisfied. So far, not only did he successfully find the Eternal Night Palace, but he also successfully got help from Musashi. Then, he successfully got the map. It was as if everything was arranged. How could he not be satisfied? Sir, be careful on the road ahead. Auric kindly reminded at this time. Although there are marks on the map and the safety factor is increased, Land of Fall is strange. No one knows if a new trap will suddenly appear. Of course. Tayenzi waved his hand and thanked him. Auric politely sent him off and waved goodbye as if they were old friends. When he knew that Tayenzi entered a fog, he stopped smiling. TSK, the person that Musashi introduced, is really good. The young man with a ponytail chuckled at this time and then took out an object with a backhand. It was something like a walkie-talkie. Auric put the item on his lips and said in a low voice, All units, Musashi introduced someone to pick the blood tie fruit again. After that, Auric took back the item and continued to squat somewhere on the periphery of Land of Fall and began to sell his map. The map was real, and it did take a lot of time to explore it. Many newcomers who just entered the dimensional crevice and wanted to come to Land of Fall to see or try their luck would need it. So this business, Auric had always been doing this kind of business. He liked the feeling of the seed world's origin accumulating little by little. But this thing was basically not much on each newcomer. Most of them were plundered from the original seed world when they were promoted. It was not much, at most a fraction. At this moment, Auric, the map seller, you are still here. At this moment, a deep voice sounded from not too far away. Auric looked over and saw a few figures flying over. They were dressed in white robes, had their faces covered, and their auras were obscure. This was the most common attire for those who came to the Land of Falling Air. You want a map? Auric never asked about the origin of the person who came. This was a way of survival. If it was a newcomer, it would be a different story. Give me the latest one, the guy in the lead said directly. 001 Seed World's origin. There is no origin. The guy in the lead shook his head, then waved his hand and flicked out an item. This is 100 strands of high-level divinity. It is enough to equal 0. 01 Seed World's origin. Okay. Auric took the item with a smile and then gave the map. Divinity was also a good thing, and many mythical gods needed it. In the dimensional crevice, the highest and hardest currency was naturally the seed world's origin. But this thing was rarely circulated, so it was more treasures or divinity. Of course, divinity crystals and the like were also possible, but the value was naturally lower. Another question. The guy who just went in, what was he looking for? Auric said with a smile. I rarely inquire about the whereabouts of others. This way, I could do business for a long time. The other party did not speak. After a simple nod, he left with his people and went straight into the fog outside Land of Fall. At this time, Alric put the divinity light cluster in front of his nose and sniffed it. He muttered, "So fresh. Could it be that he just drew it from himself? So poor." Shaking his head, Alric continued to set up the stall, but soon he dozed off. It was really rare to encounter two groups of customers in such a short time. Many times, Alric had to wait in vain. Although there were countless powerful creatures walking in the dimensional crevice, they could not withstand the size of the dimensional crevice. The map was too big. No matter how many people were placed inside, it still seemed quite empty. As soon as they left the area of the fog, the group of white-robed and masked visitors stopped directly. One of them lifted his hat. "Father God, what is the origin of that guy just now?" The one who was asked was the one who bought the map. At this time, he also lifted his hat and pulled down his mask, revealing his true face. He was the pillar that escaped from subworld number 002, Sun God Ra. The identity of this group of people became obvious. At this time, Sun God Ra looked at his daughter, Matt, and said in a low voice, "His name is Alric. He has always been selling maps in the periphery of the Fallen Land. His origin is quite mysterious. Some people speculate that he came from the subworld of the magic law, but he rarely fights and never takes the initiative to start a conflict with anyone. However, since he can freely explore and draw maps in the Fallen Land, he can't do it without some ability. There is no need to offend him." Goddess Matt nodded. She had never been to the dimensional crevice. She was left behind as a backup for Sun God Ra. Now, the role of the Goddess Matt had been played, and she had also truly set foot in this vast and boundless space. Everything was unknown to her, and everything was new. "Father God, where are we going next?" Goddess Matt thought for a while and asked. Sun God Ra opened the map and looked at it. He thought for a while and said, "In the past, when I explored the Fallen Land, I found a mother tree of the blood fruit. I collected it. Now that I think about it, the blood fruit should have matured." Blood fruit. Goddess Matt blinked curiously. Ra, the sun god, smiled and said, "You've just come to the void, so you don't know the magic of the blood relation fruit. It's a rare treasure in the crack between dimensions. You can use it to trade or use it for yourself. It's also very useful." Goddess Matt was even more curious. Sun god Ra said, "The main function of this blood fruit is blood kinship. After eating the blood kinship fruit, we will be able to have a certain concept and sense our own existence in this endless crevice." Goddess Matt frowned. Sensing one's own existence was worth thinking about. What were gods? Gods were existences that had completed the unification of their own legends. However, there were strong and weak gods. Some gods could only complete the unification of a few subworlds, but some could achieve the unification of tens, hundreds, or even thousands of different subworlds. However, in reality, the theory in the dimensional crevice was that no matter how many legends you completed the unification of, there would always be someone who was nothing living in an undiscovered subworld that was independent of you. In that case, Goddess Matt thought through the key point. Once you find your own strange world through the blood kinship fruit, you can enter it and expand the scope of the legend. You can then improve yourself. In that case, the blood kinship fruit is indeed very magical. Compared to exploring randomly, the blood kinship fruit can indeed make it easier for us. Sun God Ra said casually, "However, it only has a certain probability. It is very likely that you won't be able to sense anything after eating 10 or 20 of them. However, if you're lucky, or if you take the first bite, you can get a revelation. Therefore, the value of the blood kinship fruit isn't very high. However, if it is the fruit of the mother tree, it is different. The fruit of the mother tree is the blood kinship fruit king, and the probability of getting a revelation is 100%. Father God, could it be that you—" "That's right. I obtained a few in the past and used them. I also found myself in a few different subworlds and expanded the legend." Sun God Aric's eyes lit up at this time. "It has been so long. There must be a mature fruit king on the mother tree. Let's go. If everything goes well, even if we can't find a void artifact in the Fallen Land, when we come out, we will have a chance to improve." Goddess Mat nodded heavily. Not only her, but the other pillar gods beside her also showed a hint of eagerness in their eyes. Who didn't like to improve? It was the same for gods. After all, leveling up could make people happy. Passing through the fog, Tainzi followed the marks on the map and easily avoided layers of traps. At present, everything was going very smoothly. Tainzi's confidence increased greatly, and his mood became more and more relaxed. "Oh, you are the one that Musashi called to pick the blood kinship fruit." On the road, a burly man suddenly appeared. He was barefoot, wearing linen clothes, and had solid muscles. He was carrying a huge axe. "Yes, I wonder who this is?" Tainzi was startled. He was about to take out the token and was about to operate it. Unexpectedly, the burly man nodded. "Then come with me. I prepared everything for you." Tainzi's hand suddenly froze, and he couldn't help but open his mouth. Although this trial was just for show, but Master Musashi, wasn't this too fake? Since it was arranged to this extent, was there a need for him to personally make this trip? In front of the Eternal Night Palace, couldn't they just let him in? He didn't really understand the thinking of these gatekeepers. Tainzi could only politely nod and cup his hands. "Then, I will have to trouble this brother." "You are welcome." The burly man waved his hand and patted Tainzi's shoulder. He laughed and said, "After all, Musashi cut off half of my body and almost made me unable to reincarnate. I must take revenge." "Huh?" Tainzi couldn't react. Tainzi's shoulder seemed to be grabbed by a steel claw, and he couldn't break free. Tainzi revealed a frightened expression. "What the hell?" Suddenly, things didn't go well. Chapter 1660. How did it become like this? Tainzi couldn't help but ask himself from his soul. Everything was going smoothly, as if it had been arranged beforehand. How did it become like this? Let's take a look at Tainzi's current situation. At the mouth of a blazing volcano, he was suspended above the bubbling magma by a rope hanging in the air. The distance between his toes and the magma was less than 1 centimeter. If he scratched his right foot with his left foot, the forefoot of his right foot would definitely touch the magma. He really scratched it, relying on the toughness of the Black Soul Envoy's body. Then there was no more then. It was so painful. He didn't know what kind of material the rope was made of, but it actually made his ability to turn into a mist become ineffective. He was roaring in his heart. The magma in this crappy volcano could even damage the body of a Black Soul Envoy. This was too much. This Black Soul Envoy's body was obviously remade by Master, and it was obviously made of a better material than his original body. Inferior quality, impurities. Enjoy it. This is called Melt Everything Volcano. Even Primordial Devil of Void would be nothing if it fell into it. The stout man who tied Tainzi up and brought him here sneered. "What kind of name is this?" Tainzi couldn't help opening his mouth, as if he was insulted. The stout man didn't care at all. "Anyway, it doesn't have a name. I can call it whatever I like." "You don't like it? Climb up and hit me." Sir, may I ask if I offended you?" Tainzi changed his tone, trying to reconcile. "I'm just an acquaintance of Musashi. He asked me to come here for a deal. As the saying goes, every injustice has its perpetrator, every debt has its debtor. If you want revenge, you can go to him. I'll definitely cheer for you." "Bah, if I could beat that bastard Musashi, when I need to tie you up and vent my anger here." Tainzi didn't feel good at all. This burly man was really a mudslide. "To tell you the truth, I have an irreconcilable feud with that Musashi." At this time, Tainzi said hatefully, "That thief molested my 800-year-old mother, slept with my 300-year-old sister, and even planned to not let go of my 249-year-old yellow dog." The burly man picked his nose and waved his hand. All right. The last person who said that has already sunk into a volcano. Save your anger. Enjoy it. I'm feeling great now. Let's find a place to celebrate." "Oh, right. Let me tell you one last thing. This volcano will rise. Bye-bye. How dare you treat me like this? Do you know who I am?" Tainzi sneered. "If my master stomps his feet, the entire dimensional crevice will shake." "Oh, This burly man suddenly became interested and nodded. Well, not bad. You're more interesting than those guys before. Tell me about your master. Listen carefully, Tianzi said with a grunt. My master is... He suddenly couldn't say a word. Before setting off, remember, this is a stealth operation. Don't expose your identity. I'll put a gag order on you. Who is your master? The burly man couldn't help frowning. Powerful creatures like him, who had already walked through the cracks between dimensions, were all extraordinary people. They did things straight from the heart, without so many twists and turns. Therefore, he very straightforwardly admitted that because he couldn't win against Musashi, he retaliated against Musashi's subordinates. He was very open and honest. The burly man looked at this wretched old man. At this moment, he was making a solemn vow. His heart was certain, and his fearless appearance could not be faked. He was a little worried that this old man's master had a strong background. After all, it was a dimensional crevice. Under normal circumstances, one would basically walk on their own and would not encounter anyone for a long time. However, if one were to encounter someone, it would be an ancient existence in that dimensional crevice. This was quite common. In this place, one couldn't think of it with common sense. Tianzi opened his mouth several times. He had tried very hard, but there was always an invisible force counteracting his words. He really tried very hard, but in the end, he could only take a deep breath. Humph! How can a nameless person like you know my master's name? You're not worthy. What I want to say. Oh, you're so stubborn now. The burly man shook his head, secretly regretting that he was too careful. Enjoy it, old dog. Then, the burly man directly left the crater with the big axe. Wait, old man, wait. Old. The magma of everything melts everything volcano began to rise a little. Tianzi quickly bent his waist and shivered. Help! Help! A group of masked people in white robes had been walking on the blazing mountain for a while. Father God, this land of the fallen is so strange, one of the women said in surprise. Not to mention that the extreme gravity here isn't uniform. Just in a short journey, we encountered 3 places that could restrict the use of divine power, which is shocking enough. If a powerful beast appears in the place where divine power is restricted, I'm afraid this place is indeed magical. Sun God R.A. nodded and said, but what you said is not the most common in the land of fall. In a more terrifying place, you may take a wrong step, and even your life form will be completely changed. What? Goddess Matt couldn't help but be shocked. Sun God R.A. said in a heavy voice, when I obtained the scales of good and evil, I saw a powerful life form that was not much different from me. Because of one wrong step, he turned into a white-haired mouse, a real mouse that lost all its power and was at the mercy of others. Goddess Matt couldn't help but feel chills all over her body. She was already able to use divine power, and her life form was already fixed. Moreover, she was at a higher level than humans, but her life form could be directly changed. What kind of power is needed to toy with a god like this? The goddess couldn't help but mutter to herself. According to legend, the land of the fallen is an ancient battlefield when the old era was destroyed. Sun God R.A. shook his head and said, it's still a mystery how many powerful ancient life forms existed in the old era of the dimensional crack. Since the powerful ancient life forms of that era could fall in the land of the fallen, you can imagine how dangerous it is. Let's not talk about this. There seems to be a sound coming from there. Come with me to take a look. Then, Sun God Ra's eyes fell on a volcano that was spewing thick smoke in front of them. Soon, the pillar gods of ancient Egypt had climbed to the edge of the crater of the volcano and looked down. A shriveled old man with fluffy and round hair was hanging above the magma at this moment, trembling in fear. Hero, help! Sun God R.A. didn't respond immediately. He just looked back and said to the pillar gods, this old man isn't hung here because he was caught in a trap. I'm afraid that he met an enemy. I recognize this volcano. It can melt anything, and I'm afraid it's very powerful. It seems that this person's enemy wants to kill him. Our main purpose of this trip is to explore the godly items in the land of the fallen, and we shouldn't cause trouble. one of the pillar gods said after thinking for a while. There were too many old monsters in the dimensional crack. Although the pillar gods of ancient Egypt were powerful, strictly speaking, they were only at the middle level. Besides, the trip to the subworld 002 had hurt them greatly, so they had to be careful. Sun God Ra didn't say anything. Then he suddenly looked at his daughter, Matt, and asked directly, "What do you think of this?" Goddess Matt thought for a while and said, "We can save this person and take him with us." "Why?" Goddess Matt said slowly, "This person is hanging here, and it feels like he's dead or alive. There's no one guarding here. After his enemy kidnapped him here, they didn't care about him and just left him here. That person may have gone far away and doesn't even care about this person's life or death. This is one point." Continue. Goddess Matt continued, "We can save this person, but we won't release him. We'll just take him with us. If this person's enemy comes, we won't say anything and just hand him over. We just saved him and don't know the grudge between them. Presumably, this person's enemy can't do anything. If we take this person with us, if we encounter any dangerous places, we can let him scout first." Father God said that the traps in the land of the fallen are untraceable. Even though we have the map now, we can't guarantee that we can avoid all the traps. In this way, one more explorer is one more layer of protection. As for this person dying because of exploring the traps, if we didn't save him, he would have died in the crater. Sun God Ra didn't immediately confirm. He just glanced at the other pillar gods. "What do you think?" "It's feasible." After a moment of silence, the pillar gods gave an answer. "Then let's save him." Sun God Ra nodded. A pillar god jumped down at this time, pulled up the afro old man who was about to be submerged by the magma, and then threw him on the ground. "This rope is quite magical. I pulled it hard, but it didn't break." The pillar god who pulled the old man back frowned and said, "It's okay. We don't plan to untie him anyway." Sun God Ra shook his head, then looked at the old man who was sitting on the ground and said indifferently, "We have saved you. Now you need to do something for me as a reward. If you don't agree, I will put you back to where you were. Do you understand?" The afro old man nodded quickly like a chicken pecking rice. Sun God Ra didn't ask the old man's name at this time. After letting a pillar god look after the old man, he quickly left the volcano with his people. Soon after, the burly man carrying the big axe slowly walked back, but he saw that the rope above the crater had disappeared. "Who touched my bait?" The burly man angrily moved his feet at this time, and the power instantly collapsed the crater, and a crack spread directly into the magma. At this time, a pillar of fire suddenly shot out from the magma. The burly man was shocked and revealed a look of horror. Then, a huge figure rushed out from the pillar of fire. It was a giant creature as big as a whale. It was covered in fire thorns, had 4 eyes and 6 wings. The huge creature opened its 4 eyes at the same time. Under the gaze of this huge creature, the burly man's body instantly stiffened and couldn't move. The next second, the huge creature directly opened its mouth and swallowed the rock and the burly man into its stomach, and then sank into the magma again. The volcano returned to calm. 003 Subworld, the modern world. British border, a small town somewhere by the sea. Boss Luo took the information left by Lamia's and looked at it against the sea level. This information had a rough introduction to the underwater city. This underwater city was discovered by the Black Order during a recent underwater exploration. As for the sunken Nautilus, it was the harvest during that underwater exploration. There were many rare mineral deposits in the deep sea, which could be used as precision parts for the Black Order to build armor. But in fact, most of the rare mineral deposits were in the hands of the underwater city. For this reason, the Black Order had secretly made preliminary contact with the underwater city. In the recent decades, the Black Order had even used the social forces of the world's powerful country on the other side of the ocean to help the underwater city arrange a group of sea creatures to mix into the society of the United States. Thus, they obtained a batch of rare materials with high purity. Thus, they built many powerful armors and a large number of ultimate soldiers for the former Chief Charles to use. To put it simply, he had become a traitor. Of course, if this kind of behavior happened in the land of Kelowna, they would have been arrested and convicted by the soldiers of the Xianyuan Palace long ago. Lamia's initially felt that Boss Luo was the kind of person who liked novelty, so she wanted to use the information of the underwater city as a reward, hoping that Boss Luo could help. At least he could protect her for a while. But now this information was probably a small gift. The information had the approximate location of the underwater city. Boss Luo was using this location at this time. With the location, things were naturally much more convenient, and even the cost of purchasing the location of the underwater city was saved. Okay, the location is set. As Boss Luo's voice fell, a critical door appeared in front of him, leading to the deep sea, the territory of the underwater city. Speaking of which, did the master send Tianzi to perform a mission? Miss Maid only now remembered a black soul envoy that was dispensable to her. Well, to do a small mission. Boss Luo smiled casually. It suits him, it should. Miss Maid had no opinion. In fact, she would be more relieved if Taisetsu replaced Tianzi to temporarily manage the main God Mountain. But in the end, if those players could attack the main God Mountain, the guarding boss would still be Tianzi. Let's go. Boss Luo walked directly into the critical door.